What's your name, kid?
Max.
Max. Hey, Max. Fist bump. I am Dr. Dexter Blaine. But you can call me Dr. Blaine, okay?
They were never supposed to meet. 7 years ago, Blaine's mother tried to kill me and Max.
Run away and never return. My son will never know about this child of yours. You hear me?
That night, I died. Or at least, a part of me did. But that was only the beginning of a love story I never thought I'd live to tell. Because I wasn't the only one who survived. Thankfully, Max survived.
Hey, Mom.
But shortly after his birth, Max was diagnosed with leukemia. He'd been in and out of hospitals ever since.
Hey, sweetie. We brought you both dinner.
Oh, thanks, Mom. Thanks.
How's Max?
Yeah, he's good. Just sleeping. Needs to rest.
What's wrong?
He just keeps asking if he's ever gonna have a dad.
Why don't you just tell the real father to show up?
When he's cured, I'll have more time and...
Zoe could never forget that face. It was Blaine Dexter, the father of Max. And somehow, he was now working in the same hospital where her son was being treated.
Hey, I really appreciate you two for visiting. I'm just feeling so tired. Can we go?
Sure. Let's go.
Zoe couldn't believe that out of all the hospitals in the city, this is the one Blaine worked at. She knew she had to protect herself and Max. It was for Max's own good. But how long could she avoid Blaine before he finds her out?
Hello?
Zoe, I am emailing you right now a proposal for a new client. Big budget, big everything. Think you can handle it?
Me? Seriously?
Seriously. He wants to meet tonight at 6 p.m. at Waterford International's restaurant.
Yeah, I'll be there.
You guys.
Reservation under the name Fuller?
Neither could deny it. The chemistry between them was electric.
Talent Interiors, this is Zoe speaking.
Are you joining me for dinner or not?
You are my new client?
And you are my new interior designer.
I can call my boss and have him put somebody else on the project, given our history.
Why didn't you ever call, Zoe?
Excuse me?
Why did you leave? So suddenly, I had no idea where you went.
How could she tell him the truth? What his own mother had done to her. She had to protect herself and Max. She couldn't get wrapped up in the Dexters again.
I'm so sorry. Hello. Yes, of course. Have her prepped for surgery. I'll be right there.
Is everything okay?
It will be. I guess we'll have to continue this conversation farther at another time.
As Zoe watched Blaine leave, she wished she could have explained everything to him in that moment. But she couldn't put Max at risk. Besides, Patience needed his healing hands. She remembered when they healed her from her own terrible accident all those years ago.
Oh, I'm not...
I'm sorry. I can come back.
It's okay. I'm kind of struggling with these,
Do you mind if I help? What's your name?
Zoe?
Hi, Zoe. Dr. Dexter. You can call me Blaine.
Will you be my doctor?
Yeah. You don't like me?
No, it's not that. I don't want to take you away from other patients that might need you more than me.
Well, something tells me that you need mine.
Little did he know, this same man would get me pregnant only 10 months later.
I'm sorry. I was just playing and my ball got away. Are you a doctor?
I am.
You look strong. Like a superhero.
What's your name, kid?
I'm Max. What's your name?
I'm Dr. Blaine Dexter. You can call me Dr. Blaine.
Oh, you're the brain surgeon with a penthouse downtown. And your family's loaded. You live in Moore Park, don't you?
Are you a detective?
Oh, the nurses want to marry you. Are you single?
Actually, I have a fiance. What's wrong with having a fiance?
It's just, if you were single, I would have introduced you to my mom. My grandma always says she needs a good man to take care of her. And you look like a good man.
You her matchmaker?
She used to be married, but now they don't live together anymore.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So if I fall asleep one day and never wake up again, she'd be all alone.
Well, then let's just hope that doesn't happen, okay? Who is your mom anyways?
Max? Max, I've been looking for you everywhere. Let's get you to your room, okay? Let's go.
What's wrong with the little guy?
Leukemia. His whole family's been tested, but we haven't found a match for a bone marrow transplant yet.
Bye, Dr. Blaine.
Blaine felt his heart ache at Ramona's answer. He knew how difficult it was to find that kind of donor.
Max! There you are. Where'd you go? You have to stay in your room, you little troublemaker.
Well, he struck up a friendship with a hot surgeon, Dr. Dexter.
Hey, Max, sweetie, go in. I'll be right there. Ramona, Dr. Dexter cannot know who Max is. He can't know his last name. He can't know that he's related to me, okay? Do you understand?
Zoe, what's going on?
Please, just promise me.
I promise you.
Okay. Thank you.
Zoe couldn't tell her that Blaine's mother attempted to take her life and Max's 7 years ago. But she had to keep Max safe, and keeping the truth from Blaine was the only way. But would she be able to keep them apart forever? Only time would tell.
Hi.
No need to sit. Just wanted to check up on where you're at with Blaine Dexter.
Okay. Dinner was great. He had to leave early on a hospital call, though, so now we're currently...
Moving forward, as they should be. Right, Zoe? Mm-hmm. We cannot mess this deal up. Understood?
Yes. I am on it, boss.
That's what I like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hi, it's me. Zoe. Zoe Fuller?
This was impossible. How could Zoe be expected to work for him, given their history?
Look, I know you may not want to work with me, but you're a very important client to us, and I would like to see this deal through, so I would appreciate if you could...
Why don't we meet at my place? Tonight. Let's say 6.
At your place?
Well, yeah, you need to see my furniture, don't you?
Right. Of course.
Is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
The spare key's under the mat, in case I'm not there yet. It's my fiance's, but you can use it. I'll send you the address.
Great. I will see you tonight.
Zoe had almost forgotten Blaine was engaged. She knew she had to be strong. She had to move past her fears.
You got this.
But she had no idea that her darkest fears just might come true.
Dr. Blaine Dexter, please. It's his mother. I need to speak to him immediately.
Of course, this is his house.
Suddenly, Zoe was dizzy. What was she doing? How could she meet with Blaine alone after what Blaine's mother had done to her? She cursed herself for forgetting to eat today. Her mother was right. She wasn't taking care of herself.
You again. I thought I got rid of you the first time.
Catherine, please leave me alone. I'm just trying to provide for my son.
You mean your illegitimate baby that you had with my son? Did you really think you could weasel your way back in? I will kill you. Make no mistake. If you try to get close to Blaine, I will end your life.
But suddenly, in her hallucination, Zoe thought of Max and the life she wanted to provide for him. Zoe decided right then and there she wasn't going to let the Dexter family dictate her life.
You can't scare me anymore. I'll show you who Zoe Fuller really is.
But what did Zoe just walk into? Will Blaine stay with his fiancée, despite his growing feelings? And when will Zoe run into her attempted murderer, Catherine Dexter, again?
Wow. So this is where Blaine lives. Be professional, Zoe. He's moved on.
Have you been waiting long?
Blaine, your house is amazing. Why do you need an interior designer?
For our new home. Me and my fiance.
This doesn't have to be weird. We're both adults, right? I know you've moved on. And I have too.
Is that why you were so jealous of sister being treated by me?
I wasn't jealous.
You know, she reminds me of a younger you. Impulsive. Flirty. Dangerous. Or is that still you?
Aren't you engaged, Blaine?
Good. Our second date.
I'm serious, Blaine. You need to stay professional.
I already told you, I'm engaged. And you are single?
I'm married.
But Zoe was lying. She used to be married.
Oh.
But things changed.
Well, good for you. You can leave those. We're waiting on another person. Thank you.
Who are we waiting for?
Who do you think?
Blaney.
Sophia Quincy. Everyone knew Sophia Quincy, the heiress to the Quincy Corporation, an aerospace conglomerate. This was the kind of woman Catherine Dexter wanted Blaine to be with. It all made sense.
Sophia, lovely to meet you, Chloe.
Actually, it's Zoe.
Looks so good.
Oh. Sorry. Sorry. Look at us. We're like kids. Let's talk interior design.
Yes.
Yes. I have some mock-ups together if you wanted to take a look.
Ooh.
Jeez. I love that color.
Zoe couldn't deny how nice Sophia was. Gorgeous, rich, and kind. How could Zoe possibly compete with that?
I'm so sorry. I actually have to go.
Can't it wait?
No, it's my son. He needs me.
Oh, you have a son? How darling. Blaney and I cannot wait to have kids. Right, sweetie?
Yeah.
Yes, I can grab
Sure.
these. Miss Quincy, I will be in touch with you. Dr. Dexter, good to see you.
Good to see you. Do you know her?
Hardly.
Little did Blaine know, he already had a child.
She dropped this.
Zoe?
But Zoe could never let him find that out.
Oh my god. That's the heart of the sea necklace.
It was the priceless necklace Blaine had given Zoe years ago. He couldn't believe that she still had it after all this time. Could that mean she still held a torch for him? Like he did for her?
Why would a low-level interior designer have something this expensive?
She's not low level. I need to use the restroom.
But Sophia wasn't convinced.
It's me. Look, I need some information on someone. An interior designer by the name of Zoe Fuller.
Hey, what's going on? Where's Max?
He had an episode. They stabilized him. He's fine. You can visit him soon. But they want to run a lot more tests.
Tests? What kind of tests?
The expensive kind.
Money was tight, but Zoe knew she had a fallback option.
I'm sorry, Zoe. I know money's tight for you right now, and just... Zoe. Zoe, are you okay? Zoe.
The only hope Zoe had of paying for Max's treatment was gone.
Blaine?
So what's a married woman doing on my doorstep in the middle of the night?
Look, I'm just gonna cut to the chase, okay? Do you have my necklace?
Don't you mean my necklace? Since I'm the one who gave it to you.
Blaine, please. Not now. I need that necklace.
For what? For remembering the guy you left behind all those years ago? For no reason?
That's not...
You broke my heart, Zoe.
Blaine could never know the truth. That she was forced to leave. Forced for her own safety.
I can't do this. Forget it.
Wait.
What?
Turn around. Turn around.
Could he tell how badly she wanted him?
Don't lose it again.
More confused than ever, Zoe had what she needed to pay for Max's treatments. But given the history, could she really sell it?
I came as soon as I heard.
This is Matthew, the man she married, and the heart she had broken. All because she could never stop thinking about her first true love, Blaine Dexter.
Thank you. What am I supposed to do?
We will get through this. All right? Together.
Come to bed. It's been so long since we...
I can't. The hospital needs me.
It wasn't just the hospital that needed Blaine. Blaine might be Max's only hope. But could Zoe tell Blaine the truth?
They said the chemo would work, and it's not working.
Look, this can happen with chemo. Patients can build up a tolerance to it, then it loses efficacy. Zoe, I looked over Max's chart. He has chronic toxic hepatitis. Now, there are ways of treating this, but...
Let me guess, it's really expensive. The bills just keep racking up. I'm never gonna get out of it.
And in that moment, Zoe knew what she needed to do.
Matthew, I know we're not married anymore, but...
I can't give you any more money, Zoe, I'm sorry.
It's not that. It's just. Could you watch Max tonight? I have something that I need to do.
Of course.
Thank you.
Tell me.
The patient is in triage.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's the husband, huh? What does he have that I don't?
Long night, Dr. Dexter. You were incredible in surgery.
Thanks, Ramona. I'm headed home. I gotta get some sleep. Page me if anything comes in, okay?
Sorry. Oh, it's a good thing your coffee was cold.
You in a hurry to see your husband, Zoe?
Even though Zoe hated lying to Blaine, she couldn't risk him knowing that she was there for Max. He couldn't know about
Why
him.
else would I be here?
Good. Go on. I'll see you around. Wait. I'm sorry. It's really hard for me to see you as someone else. You need to change out of that shirt.
Probably.
Here's a shirt.
Thank you. All right, I'll turn around.
I've seen you naked before.
Yeah, well, that was a very different time, wasn't it?
She was driving him wild. How could he possibly stand this?
You haven't changed a bit.
It was really happening. They were about to give in to their desires after being apart for so long. Zoe couldn't believe it.
It's your wife. She wants to see me.
She's not my wife yet.
Wait, we can't do this. This is too messy. I mean, you're engaged and...
And you're married.
Right.
Unless there's something that you're not telling me. Where's your necklace? Where's your necklace, Zoe? Zoe, where's your necklace?
I had to sell it.
You sold it? Why? Why would you sell it? Why?
I can't tell you.
So that's what I meant to you?
No.
I guess that settles where we stand.
Dr. Dexter.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, but we need you in surgery. We've got a complicated case.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
Blaine, please let me explain to you. I just needed.
Whatever the reason, I hope you got what you needed.
Hi, baby.
Sophia. Listen, I think we need
What's wrong?
that necklace. Where did you get that necklace?
I bought it at a pawn shop.
A pawn shop?
Clearly, whoever sold it didn't care about it.
Take it off. Now.
Why? Tell me. I know it was hers, Blaine.
You know nothing.
I know she sold it. And that says a lot. If it helps, apparently she needed the money. Badly.
She did?
So forget about poor, pathetic interior designer and start thinking about the future. Your wedding to me. Hospital needs you. Of course. Don't tell me. Just go.
Blaine knew that no matter how hard Sophia tried, she would compare to Zoe.
Zoe, just the gal I wanted to see. Look, since you are taking on big accounts now, I am sending you to Scottsdale for a couple days. Huge opportunity there with a new client. I need you to close the deal.
Talon, that is so great. But I
But, Zoe, this is what you wanted, isn't it?
Yes. Of course. Thank you.
Okay. I like that.
Yes. Hi. I'm so sorry I'm late. I got held up at work.
At work? Huh. It's so funny. I called your office and they said that you weren't there, that you spend a lot of time at the hospital.
Yes. I have family there.
How convenient. So are we going to go over designs or not?
Of course. Of course. So I was thinking that we could draw some inspiration from...
Oh, my necklace. I found it at a pawn shop. It's so funny, the kinds of things that you can find in the most surprising places.
It definitely suits you.
I know, it does. Oh, and Zoe, I don't like people envying my things, so keep your eyes on your own jewelry. Understood.
Understood. Miss Quincy.
Did Sophia know what was happening between Zoe and Blaine? Did she know that Zoe sold the necklace to a pawn shop? Blaine couldn't get Zoe out of his head. What could she possibly have needed to sell the necklace for? What was so important?
You sneaking out?
Dr. Blaine!
Where you going, little man?
Can't tell Nurse Ramona.
Where are you going, little man?
I want to get my mommy a pet.
Pet. Okay. Does she like animals?
Not really, actually. It's just... I don't think I have much time left. And I wanted to have something, or at least someone, that could live longer than me.
Well, you know what, Max? You're gonna live a really long life. And your mom is so lucky to have a guy in her life like you that cares about her.
You still haven't met her. You'd really like her.
I'm sure that I would. You know what? I got a little time to kill, and I know a really cool pet store right around the corner. Wanna go check it out? Show your mom how thoughtful you are? Huh?
Yeah.
All right, follow me.
How is he? Max will be receiving experimental treatment for the next few weeks. But my boss called and they need me in Scottsdale for work. Is there any chance that you could handle visiting Max for me just while I'm gone?
Of course, Zoe. We'll take care of him, of course.
Thank you.
Suddenly, the day caught up to Zoe. The encounter with Blaine, the confrontation with Sophia.
Okay. Need a little water? Why don't you come sit for a little?
No, I need to spend as much time with Max before I go.
Oh, to tell that haughty doctor I haven't forgotten about him. Unless you've gotten to him yet again.
Zoe knew she was being paranoid. How could Ziva possibly know what happened between her and Blaine?
What did you say?
What?
That's exactly how Zoe felt too. The ghost of her past.
You gotta introduce this little guy to your mom, huh? You excited?
Yeah.
Zoe, you look like you've seen a ghost.
No, I'm fine. It's just been No.
It hit Zoe. How natural Blaine was with Max. How compatible they were. Maybe life didn't need to be so lonely. It was time to tell Blaine the truth.
Blaine, this restaurant is lovely. You always know just what I'll like. Sophia praised him. Blaine just smiled faintly in reply. His gaze kept returning to the heart of the sea necklace around Sophia's neck. $4 million. Sell me the necklace. Sophia's face paled and her eyes turned red instantly. Blaine, who are you buying the heart of the sea for? Blaine's heavy eyes stared straight at Sophia. No matter who it is for, there's one thing for sure. It doesn't belong to you, nor should it be around your neck. Tears flickered in Sophia's eyes. It doesn't belong to me? Who does it belong to then? Does it belong to Zoe? Blaine looked at Sophia's tear-stained face, but found he couldn't muster any pity for her. Sophia, the necklace around your neck is my memory, my youth. Why else do you think I want to buy it? Sophia's face was white. I'm your fiancé, Blaine. So, I don't think it's appropriate for my fiancé to wear my ex-girlfriend's necklace. Blaine's eyes blazed with anger. Take it off, Sophia. The next day, Zoe received a call from Sophia. She asked Zoe to come to see her, as Sophia felt there were a few problems with Zoe's latest design. Wanting to please a client, Zoe immediately offered to meet Sophia. Zoe quickly took down the address Sophia gave her and left. Now, standing outside the location where Sophia had asked that they meet, Zoe was in a trance. Sophia had asked Zoe to meet her at Winchester's, the finest bridal shop in Phoenix. Finally, Zoe reluctantly opened the door and entered the elegant and expensive bridal store. Zoe couldn't believe this was happening. Zoe had now become an unwilling witness to Sophia's final wedding dress fitting. Zoe suddenly saw Blaine standing in front of her. When he saw Zoe standing at the door, Blaine's usually expressionless eyes flashed with some unspoken emotion as they glittered and darkened. Zoe! Sophia's voice came from behind her. Zoe felt even more depressed. Sophia, I think you're too busy today. I should be going. We can talk about your design concerns another time, Zoe told her. Zoe, don't be like this. Sophia then took Zoe's hand affectionately and smiled. I'm just so busy right now with all the last-minute wedding preparations. It's happening so soon that this was the only time I had to meet with you. And don't worry, we're almost done. My reception dress was the last one I needed to try on. Zoe took a deep breath and nodded in agreement. All right, I'll wait for you. Suddenly, Zoe dropped the magazine, stood up and walked over to Blaine. She needed to put an end to this farce. Blaine watched Zoe's approach silently. Zoe nervously swiped her hands down the side of her jeans. Zoe paused for a moment, bit her lip, then continued. I don't want Sophia to misunderstand anything. In the future, Dr. Dexter, we cannot meet again in private. Blaine's dark eyes sparked at her words. Then he smirked and said, Then I'll have to trouble you to control yourself and not provoke me again. What Blaine said sounded harsh to Zoe. She cleared her throat and said hoarsely, Could I trouble you to mention to your fiancé that in the future, it would be best if she asked to meet me at the job site or another neutral location? It's somewhat awkward as an outsider to be the witness to such a private moment. A dark glint appeared in Blaine's gloomy eyes as he stared deeply at Zoe. Suddenly, he averted his eyes and said, You can leave. Please stay out of my world from now on and never dream of breaking in again and messing up my life. As he said this, Zoe could feel her own heart go cold. Dr. Warner had called a meeting of the hospital's surgical staff to discuss whether they should operate on a patient who was also HIV positive. It was very evident to Blaine that Dr. Warner wasn't in favor of this operation. David leaned over to whisper, Blaine, what do you think about this? Blaine raised his eyebrows and pursed his lips. What about you? I think what Dr. Warner is saying sounds reasonable, David replied. And you? Blaine turned to Jose, who sat on the other side of him. Jose pointed at David. I'm with David. I think what he's saying makes sense. Blaine kept his hands leisurely in the pockets of his white coat. He was calm and spoke with authority and immediately had everyone in the room's attention. Our duty as doctors is to prolong life. Without brain surgery, this man's life will be over. Therefore, I'm in favor of conducting the operation, and I'll volunteer to do it myself. Ramona was still worrying about the operation when she happened to see Zoe in the hall the next day. Ramona called out to her, Zoe! Dr. Dexter is putting himself in danger, and I fear that only you can stop him. On the day of the surgery, the whole neurology department was filled with a strange sense of nervous anticipation. Blaine had begun the surgery on the patient at 11 o'clock that morning. Now it had been 5 full hours, and the operation still hadn't ended. Scalpel. Blaine reached out his gloved hand, and the sharp scalpel was placed in his hand. Damn it, his finger has been pierced! Jose cursed as his face turned pale. Blaine tried his best to remain internally calm as he moved his hands away to protect Kelly and comforted everyone on the scene. Jose was so nervous that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Dr. Dexter, hurry up and go rest. Let me do it. Why are you still here? No, Dr. Ramirez. Blaine told him firmly in an attempt to calm him down. My hand has already been pierced. I will finish suturing the patient. Step away from the operating table. But, Jose faltered. He didn't know what to say. Blaine finished suturing the patient and the operation was finally over. The operation itself had been quite successful, and he thought the patient's prospects overall were very good. That weekend, Zoe was spending time with Max at the hospital. Zoe was stirring the sugar into her coffee when she heard Luna and the other nurses say Blaine's name. Did you hear what happened to Dr. Dexter? Luna asked. Hearing Luna's question, all the other nurses hurriedly gathered around the nurses' station counter. It happened when he was performing surgery on an HIV-positive patient a few days ago. I heard that he had his hand pierced by a needle on the operating table and was told by the hospital director to stay home until he got his HIV test results back. Zoe could no longer hear what the nurses were saying. Luna, I have something urgent to do and I need to go out. Will you let Max know when he wakes up that I'll be back as soon as I can? Of course, Zoe. Do what you need to do. I'll let him know. Luna promised. Thank you, Zoe said as she rushed into the elevator. Now that Zoe was standing in the lobby of Blaine's building without even thinking, Zoe pressed the buzzer for Blaine's penthouse. After 10 minutes of buzzing, the phone in Zoe's pocket rang. She hurriedly answered her phone. Blaine, is that you? Are you there? She asked anxiously. Zoe, for God's sake, stop pressing the buzzer. You're giving me a headache, Blaine told her wearily. Then immediately after he finished speaking, he hung up on her. Zoe ran outside and began to shout, Blaine! Let me in! Blaine, open the door! Let me in! Zoe yelled at the top of her lungs. Blaine's penthouse was on the 20th floor, but she didn't care. She figured if she yelled as loud as she could, he'd hear her. Blaine stood by the window and looked down at the stubborn figure standing below. Seeing the woman downstairs, Blaine realized that she must have been scolded by the other residents by now. That should have made her give up. However, this was Zoe. She would fight to the death to make something happen. She'd never give up so easily. As he watched her, suddenly a basin of water was thrown from above. Damn it, Blaine swore. He obviously hadn't expected that to happen. He didn't even think. He had to get to her. Blaine grabbed his jacket and rushed downstairs. When one of Blaine's neighbors dumped cold water on Zoe's head from above, she finally went silent. Zoe, can you be any more stubborn? At the sound of his familiar voice, Zoe felt a rush of relief go through her. She felt a warm coat being wrapped tightly around her. Zoe's face lit up. She looked up at him with misty eyes. Blaine! When Zoe said his name, Blaine's eyes darkened even further. Then he told Zoe in an extremely calm tone, "My penthouse is equipped with soundproof glass." What? Blaine hadn't been able to hear her shouting. Now she was soaked and freezing. Why didn't you say so earlier? Zoe hissed at him through her chattering teeth. Blaine pulled the coat tighter around her. Stop talking. I don't want you here. I'm not leaving. Zoe stubbornly refused. Blaine, don't push me away. Not right now. Zoe, get lost. Blaine suddenly shouted. Zoe didn't move. I'm not going to leave. Zoe tried to shout back at him with all her might, but her throat was already so hoarse that she could barely get the words out. I'm not going to leave. It's just HIV. I'm not afraid. I will stay here and take care of you today. No, you need to leave. His tone was domineering and unyielding. At this moment, Zoe could clearly see the loneliness reflected in Blaine's eyes. He then added in a hoarse voice, Don't get involved with this mess. Go home and stay as far away from me as possible. Zoe's eyes were completely flooded with tears from his depressing words. Don't chase me away. This time, Zoe didn't argue with him. Her voice had softened. As soon as she spoke, her tears began to fall. She reached out and wrapped her arms around Blaine's muscular waist to hug him, ignoring everything else. She pressed her face against his soft shirt and whispered, Blaine, don't chase me away. I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave. Please don't make me. Don't get involved with this mess. Go home and stay as far away from me as possible. Zoe's eyes were completely flooded with tears from his depressing words. He clearly had been shunned these past few days by his so-called friends. I can't even find half a friend now. As he'd said this, she'd felt her heart breaking for him. She couldn't imagine what it must feel like to have people afraid of you and avoiding you because of their fear. Don't chase me away. This time, Zoe didn't argue with him. Her voice had softened. As soon as she spoke, her tears began to fall. She reached out and wrapped her arms around Blaine's muscular waist to hug him, ignoring everything else. She pressed her face against his soft shirt and whispered, Blaine, don't chase me away. I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave. Please don't make me. Even if you've been infected, I wouldn't catch it just from being in your apartment. You're a doctor, so why don't you even have this kind of common sense? Ever a gentleman, Blaine opened the car door for Zoe. It's late, so drive carefully, he told her. She nodded that she would be careful before telling him, Don't worry about your leave of absence. The hospital really didn't have much choice under such circumstances. Nothing has been decided or determined yet. Blaine didn't answer her. Zoe knew what Blaine was thinking. If he were diagnosed with HIV, then his dream of being a doctor would come to an end. A dream he obviously wasn't ready to relinquish. When will your test results be in? Zoe asked him. Soon, probably in the next few days, he answered. Zoe knew the longer they made Blaine wait, the more painful the wait would be for him. Zoe looked up at him. Blaine, when you get your results, no matter what, I hope you'll share them with me. Blaine gazed at her with lowered eyes. I promise you, you'll be the first to know after me. No matter what the outcome is, I will not hide it from you. Good. Zoe nodded, a bit choked up. Then, I'm leaving. Goodbye, Blaine. Seeing the expression on Blaine's face, Zoe felt 1,000 butterflies take flight in her stomach. Blaine gazed deep into Zoe's eyes, unspoken emotions swirling between them. Zoe, no matter what happens, thank you. Zoe pursed her lips, trying to suppress her whirling emotions. After taking a deep breath, she said to him, Blaine, if one day, if there ever really comes a day when everyone else in the world abandons you, believe me when I say, I'll be there for you. As long as I'm alive, you will never be alone. I'll always be there for you. I'll always be your friend. As long as she was alive, Blaine would have her and their son. Zoe had already thought about it. If the results of his HIV test were positive, she would have to tell him about Max. She couldn't deny him that last shred of hope. Blaine suddenly let go of her hand. With a hint of coldness slipping into his eyes, he lifted his lips and said, Goodbye, Zoe. Goodbye, Blaine. The emptiness that suddenly appeared in Zoe's heart made her feel slightly disappointed. Zoe smiled awkwardly, then started her car and drove away. The days of waiting for Blaine's test results were undoubtedly among the most torturous of Zoe's life. It had been 3 days since she'd seen Blaine, and his results were expected any time now. Zoe was so worried. Zoe, you wrote another wrong number on this blueprint. Courtney walked over to Zoe's desk with a CAD drawing in her hand. Oh, is that so? I'm so sorry. Let me check again. Zoe apologized as she opened her CAD software. Courtney leaned her hip casually against Zoe's desk and looked at her worriedly. Hey, what's up with you these past few days? Is everything okay? Is Max doing all right? He hasn't had any more complications, has he? No, Max is doing okay. Zoe shook her head and smiled apologetically as she took the CAD drawing from her. Come, let me see what's wrong with the drawing. Okay, well, as long as you're fine, as long as Max is fine. Seeing how worried you've been this week, I've been growing concerned, Courtney told her. I'm fine, don't worry. Zoe smiled at her friend in an attempt to reassure her. Hey, Zoe, this just came for you. An assistant approached Zoe's desk holding an express delivery envelope. Here you go. Thank you. Zoe took the envelope and looked at it, puzzled over what it might be. What's that? Courtney asked her curiously. I don't know. Zoe shook her head and tore the envelope open. Inside it were only a few pieces of thin paper. Zoe started to read them, still puzzled, when suddenly the words HIV and test results jumped out at her. At that moment, Zoe's heart stopped beating. These papers were the result of Blaine's HIV test. Within a few seconds, her palms grew slick with sweat. Zoe had been anticipating the results, but now that she held them in her hand, she realized she was too cowardly to look at them. She closed her eyes and pressed the papers against her heart. She prayed for a moment and then opened her eyes. She took a deep breath and mustered the courage to turn to the last page. When she saw the words she was looking for, Zoe's eyes became watery. She was trying her best to control her emotions, but she couldn't help herself and burst into tears. This sudden change in mood frightened Courtney, who was still standing there. Zoe, what's wrong? What happened? Why are you crying? Please, don't cry. Don't cry. Courtney was trying to calm Zoe as best she could. Court, I'm fine. I'm just so happy. These are tears of joy. Zoe was so relieved that her prayers had been answered. His test results were negative. Blaine didn't have HIV. Good morning, Dr. Dexter. Hello, Dr. Dexter. So good to have you back. Dr. Dexter, we heard the good news. Congratulations. Blaine walked towards his office with a smile and his hands in the pockets of his white coat. On the way, many familiar faces he passed called out to him in greeting. Today was his first day back at St. Mary's since receiving his negative HIV test results. Blaine, welcome back. David walked over and hugged Blaine. Dr. Dexter, we missed you so much. Jose was so excited that he immediately jumped up and hugged Blaine, slapping him hard on the back as he did so. Man, you really scared us. Blaine hugged both men back, thanking them for their brotherly affection. Dr. Dexter, it's so great to have you back with us, Ramona said, her voice cracking with emotion. Then she burst into tears and hugged Blaine tightly. In the crowd, Zoe couldn't help but wipe her tears away. As Blaine shook hands with yet another staff member, he spotted Zoe at the back of the crowd. After everyone had left, he walked over to where Zoe stood waiting for him. Zoe looked a little uncomfortable. "You seem a little embarrassed by all the adoration and attention." "It's not that I'm embarrassed, I just feel that all this praise isn't necessary. I'm just like any other doctor, I was just doing my job." Blaine habitually put his hands into his pockets as he said this. Zoe extended her right hand toward him. "Congratulations." "Congratulations on what?" Blaine asked in confusion. He stretched out his hand and shook hands with her. "Congratulations on returning to your beloved profession, of course." She smiled. "Thank you, Zoe." Zoe turned around and walked away, heading down the long corridor. Suddenly, a charming voice called out to him, "Blaine!" It was Sophia. Sophia intimately held Blaine's hand and apologized. "Sorry, Blaine. Have you been mad that I didn't come to see you these past few weeks?" "Sophia, no need to explain so much to me. I didn't care at all." Whether it was because Sophia was too busy or because she was panicking, Blaine didn't want to discuss the matter any further. He really just didn't care. The moment Blaine got off work, he saw Max sneaking out of the hospital doors from afar and entering the pet store next to the hospital. Blaine tilted his head to take a look, then without even thinking about it, followed Max into the store. Blaine found him standing on his tiptoes beside a tall fish tank. Blaine squatted down beside him and imitated his actions, looking at the little red fish in the tank. "What are you looking at? Do you want to buy this fish?" "Yes." The little guy nodded heavily. Then his gaze became more serious as he watched the fish swim in circles. "Dr. Dexter, tell me, which fish do you think will live longer than me?" Max's words stunned Blaine for a moment. His throat was a bit dry. "None of them will live longer than you, Max." Max chuckled as he shook his head a bit sadly. "Dr. Dexter, I know you are lying to me." Dr. Dexter is a doctor. If the doctor says that the fish can't outlive you, then they won't outlive you. Max didn't respond to Blaine. Instead, he asked the shop's owner, "Sir, do you have fish that are in good health?" The owner looked puzzled. "Little man, all of our fish are very well taken care of." Max stuck his head over and reminded the shopkeeper, "Remember, I need a fish that can't get sick." Blaine helped the little guy settle the debt. When the owner collected the money, he couldn't help but praise. "Sir, your son is really cute." Blaine lowered his head and looked down at the little boy standing beside his feet. He reached out his hand and touched the warm little head and smiled. "You misunderstood. I'm not his father." "Really? I would never have guessed. You two really do look alike," the man replied, clearly surprised. Blaine smiled but didn't say anything more. He figured this was just the false flattery of a salesman. He led Max out of the store. Max followed him into the hospital with the small fish tank in one hand and Blaine's big hand in the other. "Max, can you tell me why you bought this fish?" Blaine asked. "It's for my mommy. I want the fish to keep her company." As the little guy spoke, his footsteps suddenly quickened. Blaine was very curious about Max's mother. He wanted to meet the woman who had raised such a sensible and smart child. Looking down at the little guy, Blaine smiled and asked, "Hey Max, do you want to bring Dr. Dexter to meet your beautiful mommy?"
No. It hit Zoe. How natural Blaine was with Max. How compatible they were. Maybe life didn't need to be so lonely. It was time to tell Blaine the truth.
When Blaine asked Max if he wanted to introduce him to his beautiful mommy, the little guy was excited by the idea. "Yes, Dr. Dexter, come meet my mommy." Unexpectedly, as soon as the two of them walked into the hospital's lobby, they bumped into Sophia. And even more unexpectedly, Blaine's mother, Catherine Dexter, was with her. "Mom?" When Blaine saw the dignified and graceful woman opposite him, he was pleasantly surprised. His mother was hard to get close to, and he wondered why she had come. "What are you doing here?" "Son." When Catherine saw her precious son, whom she hadn't seen for a very long time, she was so excited that her eyes welled up with tears. She reached out and hugged Blaine. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, Mom. Why didn't you give me a call when you knew you were coming here?" I just got off work. We could have missed seeing each other, Blaine replied. Your mother said that she wanted to surprise you, Blaine, so I didn't call ahead, Sophia explained with a smile on her face. Sophia suddenly noticed the little boy standing by Blaine's feet. Wow, where did this child come from? He's such a little cutie. Hello, Max greeted Sophia with a shy smile. Then, clutching his fishbowl, Max turned to the older woman standing beside Sophia and added, Hello, grandmother. As he greeted Catherine, he gave her a lopsided, childish smile. Catherine frowned as she looked down her nose at the child beside her son's feet indifferently. She adjusted the blazer she wore and sniffed coldly. Grandmother is not a name this child should be calling me. The sensitive Max's smile faltered. He didn't understand why the lady seemed not to like him. Mom, don't be like that. He's just a little boy. Understandably, he would call you grandmother. You probably look like his own grandmother. Blaine patted Max's bald head to comfort him. Blaine? Catherine was flustered. How can you speak to me that way? And in defense of such a boy out of all things. Blaine, please relax. Sophia was playing the peacemaker. She touched Blaine's arm and said in a low voice, Your mother came here with great difficulty. Don't make the relationship worse. Blaine took a deep breath and sighed. Let me take this child back to his room first. You two wait for me by the front entrance, and then I'll take you both to dinner and we can catch up. Zoe's mind was a whirlwind of emotion and pain. Seeing Catherine with Max, seeing Max with Blaine, those things were overwhelming enough. But then Catherine had said that Blaine was getting married in a week. 1 week. 1 week until Blaine was truly lost to her forever. Blaine took his mother and Sophia to dine at a 5-star restaurant not far from the hospital. After dinner, the three of them took a walk downtown. The fall festival was in full swing and the street was bustling with noise and excitement. Sophia excitedly pointed out things she thought Blaine's mother might find interesting. Blaine, however, was bored and wandered off to have a moment to himself. As Blaine walked, he noticed an umbrella pavilion set up on the corner. Next to it stood a man dressed in a cartoon costume of a bald man. The costume man was vigorously promoting the box of condoms in his hand. Drawing a little closer, Blaine decided, no, not a man after all. The person inside the costume was a woman. Blaine could hear her trying hard to promote the condoms in her hands. Don't miss out! Luxurious comfort, super thin experience, textured interior. Why did her sincere voice sound so familiar? Blaine suddenly stopped. His dark eyes were suddenly on fire as he stared fiercely at the costumed woman. Sir, give it a try. You won't regret it. 50% off tonight. Buy a box. I'll buy a box. Suddenly, a voice as cold as ice sounded in Zoe's ears. The smile on Zoe's face, which was covered by the head of her costume, froze on the spot before disappearing completely. Oh my God, why was Blaine here? Blaine's increasingly furious eyes were glaring at Zoe. She knew that he'd recognized her. Just as Zoe was about to remove the head of her costume to argue to the death with Blaine, she caught sight of Sophia approaching. And Catherine was with her. Zoe panicked. Her face turned pale under the costume. Then Zoe did the only thing she could think to do. She ran. Zoe, if it's really you inside that costume, you're dead for sure. Zoe grabbed her bald head to keep it in place and ran away in her costume in a clumsy panic. Blaine chased after her without thinking. Now he was positive that it was Zoe inside the costume. You'd better not let me catch up to you, otherwise you're finished. Blaine shouted at her costumed back as she fled. Zoe dodged and weaved through the crowded street, struggling to run in the awkward costume. But why was Blaine even chasing her? What the hell was he trying to do? Zoe's breath was growing short when she suddenly saw a sign ahead directing people to the restrooms. Zoe burst through the bathroom door and slammed it shut behind her. Panting heavily, Zoe took off the bald man's head and sat on the toilet lid to catch her breath. Bang! Zoe jumped as the bathroom door suddenly flew open and smashed into the wall. Then, with another loud bang, the door was ruthlessly slammed shut and locked. Blaine watched Zoe with fiery eyes. He was slightly out of breath, and a thin layer of sweat seeped through his white shirt. What are you trying to do? she asked him angrily. Blaine smirked coldly. Blaine was so close now, the two of them were both breathing very hard. Zoe could clearly feel the scorching air coming from between his lips as his hot breath mingled with her own. Blaine lowered his head and fiercely kissed Zoe's lips, wantonly attacking her mouth. Zoe hadn't expected him to suddenly kiss her. She pushed her hands against his chest and turned her head to the side to break the kiss. Blaine, what are you doing? But before Zoe could finish speaking, Blaine had once again sealed his lips over hers. However, in that exact moment, the phone in Blaine's pocket rang. Zoe's eyes went wide. For a moment, it was as if her breathing had stopped. Huh? Sophia's suspicious voice came from outside the door. He immediately muted his phone without hesitation. Zoe's eyes widened in disbelief. In this situation, Blaine actually dared to kiss her. Did he not know that the people standing outside were his mother and his future wife? Outside the restroom, Sophia finally gave up. Mom, let's go back to the corner and retrace our steps. We'll probably run into him that way. As soon as the two women walked away, Blaine let go of Zoe. Zoe clutched the bathroom wall beside her, panting as she glared at the man in front of her. She felt wronged and annoyed. Blaine, you lunatic! Finally, he straightened his clothes and gave her a light smile. I never understood until tonight how exciting sneaking around could be. Blaine turned around, pushed open the door to the bathroom, and calmly walked out. As Blaine calmly walked out of the ladies' room, he could hear Zoe cursing his name. Several other salesmen were still there, doing their best to promote their products. Blaine walked up and told the salesman closest to him calmly, I'll buy all the boxes you have here. Count them and tell me how much. What? The salesman was so surprised that he couldn't even close his mouth. Blaine frowned impatiently as he urged the man, Count them, I don't have all night. Sir, there are a total of 20 cases. Each case contains 50 individual boxes. So the total for all of them is $20,000. For such a good customer, I will give you 10% off, so your total is $18,000. We take cash or credit cards. No need for a discount. Charge me the full $20,000. But Zoe Fuller's name is to be written on the invoice, and she should earn the full commission on this sale. She's the one who convinced me to buy them. What? The salesperson thought he didn't hear Blaine clearly. Blaine raised his eyes and looked at him harshly. Is there a problem? No, of course not. Tell her my surname is Dexter. She'll know where to send them. After Blaine said this, he walked away without looking back. Zoe finished her work and dejectedly walked back to her car. Throwing her bald head carelessly into the back seat, Zoe turned on the engine and started to drive home. Pulling into her driveway a short time later, Zoe turned off her car and sat there for a long moment, thinking about all that had happened that night. Zoe got out and shut the car door. As she was turning around to head inside the house, Zoe saw her. Sophia was standing in front of her house. Zoe looked at Sophia in astonishment. Under the dim streetlight, Sophia's black dress disappeared into the night sky, giving her a somewhat eerie appearance. Her face, which always had a gentle smile, was now so cold that it made Zoe shiver. When Sophia saw Zoe, she slowly approached her one step at a time, each click of her high heels seemingly more ominous than the last. It was Zoe's first time seeing Sophia like this. To be honest, Zoe felt a rush of apprehension watching her approach. She looked so intimidating. Then Zoe felt a bit silly and forced herself to calm down as Sophia stopped in front of her. Sophia, you're looking for me? Zoe asked. Sophia had slapped Zoe across the face. The sudden turn of events left Zoe dazed. Zoe, how does it feel to be a mistress? It's great. It's exciting, isn't it? Zoe, how does it feel to be a mistress? It's great. It's exciting, isn't it? Sophia's words stunned Zoe for a moment. Her body froze and her face paled. I dropped my earpiece. When I turned around to look for it, I saw the two of you walking out of the bathroom, one after another. After saying this, Sophia took a deep breath, endured the dull pain in her heart, and smiled. Zoe watched as the not-so-harmless Sophia put back on her false face. Sophia's smile once again seemed gentle and warm. It's all right, Zoe. Remember what you did to me tonight. The day will come when you will pay a heavy price for this. Talon, you were looking for me? Here, take a look at this plan. Talon handed the blueprints in his hands to her. The preliminary design is for a new 5-star restaurant opening in Scottsdale. Zoe flipped through the drawings and asked, Scottsdale? Yes, we did the design for the client's restaurant here in Phoenix several years ago. Now he's opening another location in Scottsdale and wants us to design that one as well. I'm making you the lead on this project. You'll need to take a team to Scottsdale tomorrow to meet with him. Talon. Zoe pursed her lips, feeling a little awkward. Is this something Courtney can handle? This is, Finally, he put down the pen in his hand and asked, You worried about leaving your son? Yes. Zoe nodded honestly. I get it, Zoe, I do. After this initial meeting, you won't have to be on site. You can design and manage it from here. So, 3 days only. Does that work? That sounds great, Talon. Thanks for being so accommodating. I really appreciate it. She told him sincerely. Great! And look on the bright side. It's Scottsdale, your old stomping grounds. So you'll already know your way around. Early the next morning, a hazy layer of sunlight peeked through the window and onto Zoe's bed by the window. Zoe stared blankly out the window at the dawning sun. Suddenly, her eyes welled up with unshed tears. Blaine was finally going to get married. If not for such a cruel twist of fate, Zoe would have been Blaine's bride. Instead, she was forced to give him up and stand by while he became another woman's husband. Zoe wanted to fight for him, for them, but couldn't, and that was the cruelest twist of the knife in Zoe's heart. Zoe stretched out her arms and hugged her cold body. The phone in her pocket vibrated. It was one of the members of her design team. Hey Zoe, where are you? We're out front waiting for you in the van. We need to get going, her coworker told her. Okay, I'll be right there. Zoe took her suitcase and walked towards Max's bed. The little guy was still peacefully sleeping. She hoped his dreams were better than his current reality. Sighing, Zoe lowered her head and lightly kissed her son's soft forehead a few times. Not wanting to disturb his rest, she whispered to him softly, My sweet boy, Mommy has to leave for work, but she will think of you every minute of every day she is gone. I will be back as soon as possible. Goodbye, sweetheart. Zoe's voice was a little hoarse. 3 days for them would feel like 3 years. Not knowing what the future held, each day with Max was so precious, Zoe hated to miss even one. Her eyes wet, Zoe turned and wheeled her suitcase out of her son's hospital room. When they arrived in Scottsdale, Zoe and her team quickly checked into their hotel and headed out to work. They spent the entire day measuring the rooms in the restaurant and going over the blueprints and design schemes. When they were through for the day, the restaurant's owner, Evan Jones, invited Zoe and her team to dinner. At least Evan seemed like an okay guy. He was only a few years older than Zoe, but had already made a name for himself in the restaurant industry. Zoe, have you ever been to Scottsdale? Evan asked her warmly. Zoe smiled. I went to college here, Arizona University. Really? What a coincidence! I'm in town for a friend's wedding, and he's also a graduate of Arizona University. When he stops by, I'll introduce you. The man is so annoyingly superior, he makes all the men around him feel inferior. However, tonight is his last single night. After tomorrow, he'll be a married man, and the rest of us will have less competition. Zoe smiled and agreed. Sure. Look, here he is now. Evan rose and walked towards the door with a smile. Good to see you. How have you been, my friend? He greeted. I heard from Leo that you hadn't joined our group because you were too busy flirting with a new beauty from Phoenix. Are you going to introduce me to the woman that's making you bail on my bachelor party? Zoe almost thought that she was hallucinating when his pleasant voice rang out from the door of their private room. She turned around and saw Blaine's handsome face. Evan, is this the beauty Leo was talking about? He asked casually. Don't listen to Leo's nonsense, Evan replied, waving his hand. She's in town because she's the designer of my new restaurant, a new business associate, and hopefully now a friend. Sit down and have a drink with us. Let me introduce you. Coincidentally, she's also a graduate of Arizona University. Her name is Zoe. Blaine said Zoe's name before Evan could, and Zoe smiled uncomfortably. Evan was pleasantly surprised. Wow, so you two already know each other? Blaine smiled a crooked smile. We know each other. Yes. Blaine stared at Zoe for a long moment, but didn't say anything more. Evan gestured for Blaine to sit down. Hey Zoe, since you know this guy, why don't you come with me to his wedding tomorrow? Zoe could feel the color draining from her face. She hadn't expected Evan to ask her such a thing. No, I can't. I'm only here for 3 days, and then I'm heading back to Phoenix. I have a lot of work to do, sorry. She tried to smile at Evan apologetically, but Zoe feared she just looked awkward. Spend another day here. I'm your client. If I say you don't have to work tomorrow, you don't have to work. It should be a fun event. Evan encouraged her hopefully. Don't a woman, Evan. She has other plans. Blaine said somewhat hoarsely. Zoe suddenly stood up and avoided Evan and Blaine's eyes. Excuse me, I have to step out for a moment. Zoe quickly walked out of the room. She looked around for the ladies' room but didn't see it. Another door led into some sort of storage room. Zoe quickly took refuge inside. She didn't care where she was at that moment, as long as it wasn't with Blaine inside that suffocating dining room. Zoe closed the door to the small storage room, which thankfully blocked out all the noise outside. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel stray tears escaping onto her lashes. However, she stubbornly refused to let them fall. Memories of their past suddenly surged through Zoe like a ferocious beast, biting into her chest and making her tears fall uncontrollably. In college, when Zoe had pursued Blaine, she'd had fierce competition in the form of another co-ed named Madison. Madison was just like Blaine, gentle and elegant, beautiful and generous, and, of course, wealthy with the right kind of family. Zoe had been very jealous of Madison. One night in college, her friends had all gone out to a bar to celebrate another friend's birthday. Zoe was there, Blaine was there, and, of course, since Blaine was there, Madison was also there. Madison walked into the room and sat beside Blaine as if that was her rightful place. Their group began to play a variation of the game Truth or Dare, which they had nicknamed Truth or Drink. Instead of a dare, if someone didn't want to answer a question, they had to chug a beer. Unexpectedly, Zoe was chosen to ask the first question of Madison. Truth or drink? Zoe asked Madison indifferently. Truth, Madison replied shyly. Zoe didn't hold back and, smirking, asked her straight out, How many times have you cheated on Blaine? Madison's face instantly paled when she heard Zoe's straightforward question. Let bygones be bygones. Let's not talk about it anymore. I concede. I'll drink, she said. Zoe threw up her hands, telling her, Whatever. Without another word, Madison picked a beer up off the table and tried to chug it. Catching her breath, Madison sputtered an apology. I'm sorry, I'm not used to drinking so much at once. Then, with an apologetic look on her face, Madison picked up her beer again. That's enough. Suddenly, Blaine held Madison's hand. You don't have to drink it, Madison. A silly game is not worth you choking yourself to death. Blaine spoke calmly when he soothed Madison. Zoe felt a sharp pain in her chest. The more he defended Madison, the more unwilling Zoe was to admit defeat. Her delicate eyebrows slightly raised as she said to Blaine snidely, What? You can't bear to part with her? Blaine didn't answer Zoe's question. Instead, he picked up his beer. I'll drink for her. Then he started chugging the beer. For a moment, everyone in the room fell silent again. Zoe looked at Blaine, who was so admirably defending Madison, and she was in so much pain that her nose ached and her eyes reddened as Zoe fought back her tears. Suddenly, Zoe stood up and grabbed the beer out of Blaine's hand. Blaine, what right do you have to drink the beer for her? Who are you to Madison? She interrogated him sternly. Zoe was infuriated when she felt some of her tears escaping. You can't bear to let her drink it, can you? Zoe's tears ran down her cheeks. But then I am as much of a fool as you are, Blaine, because I'm reluctant to let you drink it for her. Zoe then closed her eyes and chugged down the beer. The beer burned her chest. It hurt so much, but she didn't care. Blaine grabbed the glass out of Zoe's hand and sent it crashing to the floor. Zoe, stop it. Do you think that just because you love me, I have to like you? To have love, you need two people. If there were 100 steps in love, then even if you took all 99 steps, it still wouldn't be love if I refused to take the last step for you. Do you understand? He paused as they stared at each other. Do you think that just because you love me, I have to like you? To have love, you need two people. If there were 100 steps in love, then even if you took all 99 steps, it still wouldn't be love if I refused to take the last step for you. Do you understand? Memories of the past stabbed into Zoe's chest like 1,000 needles. It was so painful that it almost suffocated her. The next day, Zoe kept herself busy with work from morning to night. She didn't even take breaks, but spent the whole day measuring, drawing, and sourcing supplies. Zoe did not give herself a single chance to catch her breath the whole day and into the night. She feared if she did and let herself think of Blaine's wedding, her heartbreak would swallow her whole. As she fell in bed that night back at her hotel, Zoe had no idea how she managed to survive her time in Scottsdale. Zoe didn't know anything about his wedding, but from his conversation with Evan last night, she knew it would be a happy and lively wedding. The celebration would probably continue long into the night. He's married. Zoe felt as if a huge part of her had died today. It was over. They were over. The next morning, Zoe took a taxi alone to the bus station. She was heading back before the rest of the design team, who were staying in town for a few more days. What a coincidence. Suddenly, the sound of a low and deep voice came from Zoe's side. Zoe turned her head in astonishment and saw Blaine standing beside her with his hands in his pockets. It was unknown whether it was because he was now married or because of something else, but Blaine seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. His normally cold lips even seemed to carry the hint of a smile. Zoe's mind was in upheaval, and her heart was filled with an obvious sense of unease. She politely smirked and said, "Why are you here?" Blaine raised his eyebrows. "Weekend's over. I'm heading back." Zoe looked at Blaine with a puzzled expression. "I'll drive. Let's go together." As he spoke, Blaine pulled Zoe's suitcase and started walking towards the parking lot. "No need." Zoe hurried to catch up with him. "I haven't had much rest. You can keep me company and make sure I don't fall asleep." Blaine added, "Where's Sophia? Why can't she keep you company? Aren't you going back together?" she asked. She was busy taking care of the aftermath and couldn't leave for a while. Blaine opened the trunk and stuffed her suitcase inside. She rushed over to stop him, but the lid of the trunk was slammed shut and locked by him before she reached his side. "You're not getting in the car?" Blaine raised his eyebrows. Could she not get into the car? Zoe pondered. "Zoe, get in the car or I'm leaving you," Blaine called out the window. As Blaine had known it would, this worked, and Zoe quickly opened the door and got into the car, still sputtering and complaining the whole time. Zoe decided that in protest, she wasn't going to say another word to Blaine the whole way home. However, even her stubborn silence didn't seem to impact Blaine's good mood. Ugh, so this was what a happily married Blaine looked like. Zoe's heart hurt. Zoe didn't expect him to act like this. However, Blaine didn't seem to care at all. Zoe, on the other hand, was completely thrown off by this light-hearted sight of Blaine, and her heart was instantly filled with sorrow. When they reached Phoenix, Blaine turned towards the city center and asked, "Where are you headed, Zoe? I have to work, but I'll drop you off first." "I'm going to the hospital, too." Zoe couldn't wait to see her son. The moment the car drove into the hospital parking lot, Blaine got out of the car to help Zoe with her suitcase. "Dr. Dexter, happy wedding! Congratulations!" Ramona shouted sweetly. "Dr. Dexter, congrats! How does it feel to be a married man?" Jose smiled ambiguously and hooked his arm over Blaine's shoulder. "Where's your new bride hiding?" He stuck his head out and looked towards the front passenger seat. "Sophia, hurry up and get out of the car. Why are you being shy?" Jose was speechless when he saw Zoe getting out of the car. "Zoe!" Ramona shouted in embarrassment, elbowing Jose in the side to shut his mouth, which was hanging open in shock. Blaine just stood there, happily gloating. Blaine, looking at you in such high spirits, I can see that you are now a very happily married man. I can tell you had a good time this weekend. David called out as he approached. When David saw Zoe standing beside Blaine, he was as speechless as Jose had been. Recovering after a moment, David stopped beside them. So it's like this, huh? Wow, the life of a newlywed is sure interesting. Blaine cocked his mouth in a small smile and asked lightly, "If I'm not married, can I still be considered to be living the life of a newlywed?" Blaine's words stunned everyone, especially Zoe. All of his coworkers began to bombard Blaine with questions. "What do you mean not married?" Jose asked, stunned. I'm not married." Blaine answered them with certainty. Blaine wasn't married. The words exploded inside Zoe's mind like a bomb. Her heart seemed to stop and race all at the same time. Yesterday morning, Sophia's grandfather had a heart attack before the wedding even happened. The wedding's been postponed for 3 months to give Sophia's family a chance to grieve. Zoe would be lying if she said she didn't have a trace of joy in her heart when she heard this news. Sure enough, love is selfish. My shift is starting, so I'll leave you here. Blaine left without looking back. Watching him leave, Zoe suddenly felt that the day had become a bit sunnier. Zoe wheeled her suitcase as she headed upstairs to see Max. When Luna saw her approaching, she quickly stood up. "Zoe, it's great that you're back. I was just about to call you." Zoe's heart sank when she saw Luna's anxious look. "What's wrong? Has something happened?" she asked in alarm. "Zoe, it's okay. Don't be scared. But Max is not in his room. He's been taken to the ER because of complications." Luna's words caused Zoe to halt her steps abruptly. Taking a deep breath, she held back the tears in her eyes and hurried toward the emergency room. Her heart was beating so fast. No one knew how dark it was to live every day in fear. She tried her best every day, but her best wasn't helping Max. Zoe spent the rest of the day in a daze. Sitting on a chair outside the ICU, Zoe repeatedly reminded herself to stay strong. "Zoe!" Matthew walked out of the ICU. Zoe rushed over to him. "How is he?" Matthew gestured for Zoe to sit down as he took off his mask and held it in his hand. "Max is pretty good. It's not as serious as we thought." His voice was hoarse to the point where it sounded harsh. Then he grabbed Zoe's ice-cold hand and held it in his warm, big one. Zoe, if you don't need to in the future, don't go on any more business trips. I've missed you so much these past few days." "I'm sorry." Zoe burst into tears the moment she heard this. Tears gushed out of her eyes. "This situation will never happen again. I won't ever leave Max again. I'll always stay by his side." Matthew gripped Zoe's hand tighter and tighter. Zoe was stunned and her face paled. "Matthew, your words, do you mean?" Zoe couldn't get the words out, but she didn't need to. She could see from the look on Matthew's face that she needed to stay close because Max may not have much time left. Zoe began sobbing. As a mother, she couldn't say the words aloud. Matthew pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He knew that Zoe had understood what he was trying to tell her. Zoe shook her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. She did not dare to imagine what her life would be like without Max. She couldn't imagine never hearing him call her mommy again. "Matthew, is there anything else I can do for him? I don't want him to leave. I can't let him leave." Zoe was begging like a child for a new toy, but she knew Matthew couldn't magically solve Max's illness. Matthew let out a long sigh, hesitated for a while, then said, "Zoe, we've been waiting a long time for a blood marrow donor and we still haven't found a suitable match. This no longer seems like a viable solution, the waiting and hoping." As Matthew said this, he pursed his lips with difficulty. "Actually, there's still a way. It's just that..." His eyes dimmed. "Speak! Matthew, no matter what it is, I'm willing to let go and give it a try." Zoe was so excited that tears welled up in her eyes. "Have a baby." Matthew took a deep breath, looked at Zoe, and continued, "The only way is to have a child with Blaine." a sibling's umbilical cord blood has a 25% chance of matching, while the success rate between other relatives is only 1 in 100,000. Zoe was shocked by Matthew's idea. She looked at Matthew, who had a serious expression on his face. Matthew, don't joke with me. Zoe, you know I wouldn't joke with you about something like this. Zoe's thoughts were a jumbled mess. How would this ever work? To have another child? With Blaine? That was not something that could be done easily. The relationship between the two of them was already very complicated. Blaine didn't even know about Max, and for good reason. Max had been threatened the moment he was born. How would this child be any different? Zoe shook her head. Just thinking about it made her somewhat afraid. She did not approve of this decision. For a child, it was selfish. For her, it was difficult. But for Blaine, it was even more harmful. Matthew held Zoe's cold hand and said, "Don't make a decision yet. Think about it seriously. But..." At this point, he pursed his lips. "If you decide, then the sooner the better." Zoe nodded with difficulty. "All right, I'll think about it." Her heavy heart instantly became chaotic. Blaine was sitting at his laptop typing up a research paper when the door to his office was pushed open. He saw Sophia gracefully walking in from the outside on crystal high heels as she greeted him. "Hello, Blaine." Blaine looked up at her in surprise. "Why are you here? Aren't you going to work?" he asked. "Yes, I just had some free time, so I came to visit you." Sophia sat down beside Blaine. "I didn't disturb you, did I?" Blaine pushed back his laptop, turned around to look at her, and smiled. "What, you just came here to look for me?" "Right." Sophia arched her brows and smiled sweetly. "I want you to accompany me on a picnic tomorrow, okay?" "A picnic?" Blaine said without enthusiasm. "Yes, it's been a long time since we went out on a date. Even though we haven't gotten married yet, shouldn't you make it up to me?" He could see the grievance on Sophia's face and felt a bit guilty. Blaine hadn't been thinking about his fiancée since arriving home from Scottsdale. All of Blaine's thoughts were of Zoe. Their connection was undeniable, but she was married and Blaine had a fiancée. What was he thinking? "Blaine, what are you thinking about?" Sophia saw that Blaine was lost in thought and her cheeks blushed. Blaine came back to his senses and smiled. "You said you wanted to go on a picnic?" "Yes, getting outside for some fresh air sounds delightful. We can barbecue and go for a hike. Doesn't that sound fun?" Sophia's face was filled with anticipation. "All right, then we'll go." Blaine agreed. "Great, then I won't bother you any longer. I'm meeting a friend for dinner, but I'll call you later with the details." After Sophia left, Blaine sat at his desk, staring into the now dark screen of his laptop for a long time, lost in thought. He'd realized that his emotional life was a mess. The status quo couldn't continue. It wasn't fair to anyone. Blaine sighed as he finally shut his laptop and stood up. He'd made a decision. It was time for Blaine to sort out his love life once and for all. After successfully convincing Blaine to go on a picnic with her the next day, Sophia quickly left his office before he could change his mind. Sophia had told him that she was on her way to meet a friend for dinner. However, she didn't tell Blaine that that friend was Zoe's sister Ziva. Now sitting across from Ziva at dinner, Sophia put the next stage of her plan into action. "Ziva, I'm going on a picnic tomorrow. Do you want to come too?" Sophia asked Ziva innocently. Ziva looked at Sophia, a little disinterested. At first, Ziva didn't like Sophia because she was Blaine's fiancée. But after spending more time with her, Ziva had actually come to think of Sophia as a friend. Still, Ziva wasn't really the outdoorsy type and didn't really relish the idea of a day in the great outdoors. Trying to think of a way out of it, Ziva asked Sophia casually, "Who are you going with?" "It's just me and Blaine," Sophia said nonchalantly before taking a sip of her drink. Ziva was stunned. "Is Dr. Dexter going too?" "Is it strange that he's going? He is my fiancé," Sophia asked, looking at her with a smile. Friends or not, Ziva still considered Blaine fair game and wasn't stopping her pursuit of Dr. Dexter just because she was friends with Sophia. Still, Ziva couldn't help but be suspicious of the invitation. "Why are you inviting me to go with the two of you? You're not going to use this picnic as an opportunity to rub your relationship in my face, are you? Sophia giggled. Just tell me if you want to go or not, Ziva. Oh, I definitely want to go. Just remember, you invited me, Sophia, after I steal him away from you, Ziva told her smugly. Sophia smiled gently. I have faith in him. All right then it's a date. May the best woman win, which is, of course, me, Ziva told her. She was excited by this unexpected opportunity to get closer to Blaine. Hey, why don't you invite Zoe as well? Sophia suddenly suggested. My sister? Ziva hesitated. Why would you suddenly think of inviting her? Sophia smiled. Blaine and I have become rather close with her since she's been working on our house. Besides, Zoe might want to fight for Blaine herself. Ziva laughed. My sister will definitely not be fighting with us over Dr. Dexter, but I can mobilize my sister to work on my behalf. Zoe has been working so hard recently, she could really use a day out. Okay, I'll ask her later. Great, this is going to be fun. I can't help but think this will be a picnic none of us ever forget, Sophia said sweetly. Ziva didn't notice the darker gleam in the other woman's eyes. When Ziva had invited Zoe on a picnic with friends the night before, Zoe had originally declined. Zoe had no desire to go, but after over an hour of Ziva's pestering, not to mention a huge guilt trip of how Zoe never spent any time with her little sister, Zoe had finally relented. Now, as Zoe put her car in park in front of the forest service station, she was deeply regretting her decision to attend. But even more than that, Zoe deeply regretted not asking Ziva which friends would be attending this picnic when she saw Sophia and Blaine standing outside the building chatting. Sophia turned and hissed at her sister. What are Sophia and Blaine doing here, Ziva? When Blaine saw Ziva getting out of the car, he was understandably surprised. But when a reluctant Zoe got out of the car after her, Blaine was momentarily speechless. It was obvious that Blaine wasn't happy that Zoe and Ziva were there. Finally, after half an hour, everything was ready, including the grill. All that they needed now was the firewood. I'll go gather some firewood, Blaine offered. Sophia rushed to catch up with him. Blaine, I'll go with you. Ziva was unhappy. Watching them leave, Zoe didn't say anything, but just went back to quietly adding meat and vegetable to the barbecue skewers. While Ziva complained back at their picnic site, Sophia seemed to be in an especially good mood as she walked with Blaine. She happily chatted alongside him as Blaine collected firewood. Blaine looked around. All of this wood is too wet to burn. Why don't we go look over there? He frowned as he spoke, sweat beading on his forehead. Blaine, are you all right? Sophia looked at him worriedly. I'm fine. Blaine shook his head. I suddenly feel a little hot. He took off his windbreaker, leaving behind only a thin white t-shirt that showed traces of sweat. You should leave on your jacket. You don't want to catch a cold, Sophia reminded him. It's fine, let's go. Blaine walked with Sophia deeper into the woods. He walked in front while Sophia followed behind. However, they had only taken a few steps when they suddenly felt the ground underneath them give way. Sophia screamed in shock as the two of them fell into a deep hole without any warning. Sophia was so scared that she began to cry. She threw herself headfirst into Blaine's warm embrace. Blaine, I'm afraid. What is this? What did we fall into? Don't be scared. This is just a normal hunting trap, Blaine said calmly, then looked around and confirmed. There should be people coming to save us soon. Blaine ignored her and went to the side of the hole to check for exits. There was no longer any doubt in Blaine's mind. He was a doctor, after all. All of his symptoms pointed to only one logical explanation. He'd been drugged. Someone on this picnic had spiked Blaine's drink. Blaine looked up. The depth of the trap was about 3 meters, and the edges were smooth. It would be impossible to climb up the sides by hand. They'd have to call for help. Blaine felt his pockets, but realized he didn't have his phone. Back at the picnic site, Zoe and Ziva began to worry. Sophia and Blaine had left a long time ago to gather firewood, but still hadn't returned. Give them a call, Zoe suggested. Ziva took out her cell phone and dialed Sophia's number, but her phone was turned off. In the next moment, they heard a phone ring. Looking down, Ziva saw Blaine's phone on the table by the grill. Zoe frowned. He didn't take his phone with him. It had been over an hour, so she hoped that nothing had happened to him. Ziva, wait for me here. I'll go look for them. Inside the trap, Blaine was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Whatever had been slipped into his drink must have been aphrodisiac. Who would do such a thing? It had to have been someone on the picnic. Above the trap, Sophia's excited cry was what had drawn Zoe's attention to the large hole in the ground. Zoe! Suddenly, a deep voice called out to her. Are you going to just sit there all day, or are you going to help us? He shouted. Hurry up and get someone to pull us up. Zoe said innocently, Don't worry, I'll call the police right away. But Sophia, why did you turn off your phone? I called for a long time but couldn't get through. Ziva said that your phone still had a full charge when she saw it this morning. I guess you two just wanted to be alone for a while before you called us. Sorry I interrupted. Seeing the increasingly pale face of Sophia, the smile on Zoe's face grew even wider as she spoke. Blaine looked up at the smirk on Zoe's face. He realized that now that Zoe was here, his head was clear and he felt much calmer. The antidote to cure the false effects of an aphrodisiac was the power of true love. The police arrived quickly to rescue Blaine and Sophia from the deep hunter's trap. Blaine helped Sophia tie the rope around her waist, and then the rescuers began to pull her up. Zoe didn't hesitate. She stretched out her hand in an attempt to reach Sophia and pull her over the edge to safety. As Zoe was shouting at her, Sophia reached up and grasped Zoe's outstretched hand. Suddenly, Zoe felt a sharp pain in her palm. It hurt so much that Zoe didn't even have time to think before she reflexively opened her hand. It wasn't until half a second after Zoe retracted her hand that she realized what had happened. Sophia, no! Zoe screamed in fright. The deafening sound of something hitting the ground caused Zoe's eyes to go blurry as they instantly filled with tears. Miss, why did you let go of her hand? One of the police officers asked Zoe with a dark expression. Zoe shook her head, crying hysterically. I didn't do it on purpose, I swear it. It was not intentional. The officer looked surprised. Miss, how can you say it was not intentional? I saw you let go of her hand with my own eyes. Why did you want to hurt this woman? What do you have against her? I'm going to need you to come with me down to the police station for questioning. From deep in the trap, Blaine shouted angrily up to the police. Somebody call an ambulance. What are you waiting for? This woman's injuries are severe. She has serious head trauma and we need to get her to the hospital right away. Zoe's mind went blank for a moment when she heard what Blaine said. She took 2 steps back in panic as tears gushed uncontrollably out of her eyes. She really didn't do it on purpose. It was clear that something had stabbed into her palm, causing her to let go reflexively. As Zoe thought of this, she opened up her hand. There was a needle-sized hole in the center of her palm, and blood was still seeping out. What had she been stabbed with? How did it manage to stab her? The only possibility was that it was in Sophia's hand already when she reached out and asked Zoe to help her. Zoe suddenly felt dizzy as she remembered seeing Sophia untie the rope around her waist right before reaching for Zoe's hand. She felt herself break out into a cold sweat as shivers ran down her spine, and the hairs on the back of Zoe's neck stood on end. Sophia had done this on purpose. Miss Fuller, we're going to need you to come with us back to the station. You can give whatever statement you come up with at that time, but with so many police witnesses, I encourage you to acknowledge your crime. Now, get in the car. The policeman didn't want to hear what Zoe had to say and signaled for her to get in the squad car. Zoe couldn't help but look at Blaine as he brushed past her before hurrying to the ambulance alongside Sophia. He looked extremely worried. Perhaps he would think this was an act of jealousy because Zoe had witnessed the intimacy between him and Sophia. Zoe closed her eyes. She didn't know if she had ever felt as lonely as she did at this moment. Zoe had been in the police station for hours. They obviously had no intention of letting her go. The officer who had been interrogating her stepped back into the room after taking a call. He sat down and told her sternly, Miss Fuller, I just received a call from the hospital. Miss Quincy's injuries are serious, and she is in critical condition. Let me tell you, you better pray that she makes it through this. If anything happens to her, prepare to spend the rest of your life in prison. I repeat, I didn't mean to hurt her. As Zoe spoke, her pale lips were trembling violently. Zoe was growing suspicious of these policemen. They seemed so ready to accuse her versus doing their jobs and investigating. "Can't you see the wound in my palm? Why don't you investigate this matter? Isn't that your job?" Zoe asked in frustration. The policeman impatiently put down his pen. "Miss Fuller, no matter how the wound on your hand came about, we have witnesses who saw you let go of Miss Quincy's hand. I'd advise you to admit your guilt." "I'm not guilty. Why should I admit anything? I will not plead guilty to something I didn't do. You need to get off your do your jobs and investigate." Zoe was angry. Zoe's temper enraged the policeman. He wouldn't let this woman tell him how to do his job. "You better watch your mouth. Treat me with respect when you speak to me. You're already in enough trouble." Zoe felt extremely wronged. She kicked the table in anger and frustration. Tears of grievance poured out of her. "Let me tell you, you'd better not let me out. The first thing I will do when I get out of here is file a lawsuit. This is police misconduct and discrimination. I demand to see a lawyer right now. I am entitled to legal counsel under the law. Or wait, is that another one of those pesky laws you're going to conveniently ignore?" The officer hissed at Zoe angrily. "We're done here. Maybe some time in lockup will change your mind and you'll admit your crimes." He then stood up. "Guard, please escort Miss Fuller to a cell." Zoe had no idea how long she'd been locked up in the dingy cell. She had lost all track of time. In the night, Zoe shivered with cold. The paper-thin blanket on the prison cot was useless. She'd finally been offered something to eat, but her stomach was so upset from the stress she couldn't even take a bite. Not that the ham sandwich looked appealing anyway. Just as Zoe was beginning to give up all hope, the door to her jail cell was suddenly open. Zoe raised her head to look at the officer standing there. She hadn't seen this particular policeman before. She could barely believe the words coming from the officer's mouth. "Please come with me, Miss Fuller. You're being released." Zoe was beginning to give up all hope. The door to her jail cell was suddenly open. Zoe raised her head to look at the officer standing there. She hadn't seen this particular policeman before. She could barely believe the words coming from the officer's mouth. "Please come with me, Miss Fuller. You're being released." When she entered the lobby and saw Blaine standing there, Blaine's heart hurt as he took in the sight of her. Her clothes were rumpled and her hair hung in a messy curtain around her face, and Zoe's face appeared red and puffy. As he examined her face, Blaine's gray eyes grew darker and he frowned. "Who did this?" he asked Zoe. The fear in Zoe's eyes made Blaine's anger turn into fury. The desk sergeant was shocked, and his voice trembled when he answered. "Dr. Dexter, that would be Officer Grissom, but he's not on duty today." "I'll call him right now. Dr. Dexter, please wait a moment." Not bothering to answer the man, Blaine turned back and once again his gaze focused on Zoe's injured face. Suddenly, Zoe remembered something and pulled back into Blaine's embrace. Looking up nervously, she asked him, "Sophia, how is she doing?" "She's in critical condition." Blaine answered truthfully with a hint of worry in his eyes. "She has severe head trauma and has fallen into a coma. She's relying on a ventilator to breathe." "Officer Grissom is here," the desk sergeant announced from where he'd been anxiously watching the parking lot. Officer Grissom was startled when he saw Zoe, but soon after, his eyes widened as he furiously shouted, "Who let this woman out? Didn't I say to keep her in lockup until she pleads guilty, huh?" When Blaine saw Officer Grissom's hostile attitude towards Zoe, he walked over and without a word, punched him in the face. Officer Grissom was taken aback by the sudden punch as he clutched his nose and stared at Blaine. "How does it feel to take a punch from someone bigger, stronger, and more powerful than you?" Blaine asked coldly, his dark eyes shooting out a frightening light. Officer Grissom swallowed nervously and glanced at Zoe. After a long time, he finally looked at Zoe again and reluctantly said, "I'm sorry." "Officer Grissom, hold out your hand," Blaine ordered firmly. Blaine opened his hand. There was a brooch in his hand. Blaine threw it on the desk counter and coldly said, "Officer Grissom, since you neglected to do your job, I have done it for you. I found this brooch on the floor of the hunter's trap. There are obvious traces of blood on the brooch. You can take it and examine it to see if the blood on it matches Miss Fuller's. but I can guarantee you it will. Grissom's face turned completely pale. Blaine led Zoe out of the police station. Blaine, thank you. Thank you for being the only one who believes in me. Zoe cried even harder after she finished her sentence. I should have suspected you like everyone else. Even I saw you let go of Sophia's hand, but I just didn't believe it. I don't believe you are that kind of person. Blaine's words managed to draw a fresh batch of tears out of Zoe. Zoe? He suddenly said. His voice was gentle. Yes? She replied in a choked whisper. About you and me. Blaine's voice was rough and contained a bit of pain. Finally, he lowered his head and looked Zoe in the eyes. Does Matthew know? Zoe was stunned by his question. He paused before continuing. Zoe, I don't want to become someone who doesn't care about other people's feelings because of you. If we continue, then I'm no better than you and Matthew 4 years ago. The positions are reversed, but no less wrong. The words made her heart hurt. How she wanted to tell him that they shared a lovely child between them. However, she couldn't say anything. Blaine looked away from her, back up at the night sky. If you and Matthew are happy, you will have a good life. As for me, I will do my best to wish you happiness. Zoe's tears flowed without restraint. She nodded heavily. I also wish you and her endless happiness. Thus, the two fell into a long silence. Zoe brought flowers to Sophia. She was in the VIP room of the hospital, but it seemed strangely empty. Sophia was still in critical condition. Sophia, I don't know if you can hear what I'm going to say, but I hope you can. Zoe paused and took a deep breath before continuing. First of all, I want to say I sincerely apologize. I'm really very sorry. Also, about what happened in the cave that day? Zoe lowered her eyebrows. I hope that it was really an accident and not something you planned with utmost care. A few minutes later, Zoe walked out of Sophia's room. Unbeknownst to her, Sophia had finally opened her dull eyes with much difficulty. Her hatred for Zoe had given her strength, and her hands placed on either side of her body began to tremble as she attempted to lift them. Hatred poured out of her eyes. Zoe was still entangled with her fiancé. As soon as Zoe walked into her room, Sophia immediately began formulating another plan. The sound of an emergency call for help resounded throughout the VIP hallway. Sophia's private nurse, Melinda, raced into Sophia's hospital room in a panic. Heavens, doctor, help! Miss Quincy needs help! Melinda shouted into the hallway from the doorway of Sophia's room. Someone pulled out Miss Quincy's ventilator! Come quick! Zoe had been waiting for the elevator to leave when she heard the emergency alarm go off. She turned her head abruptly and looked at the nurse standing in the doorway of Sophia's room. The nurse was also staring at Zoe. Before Zoe could regain her senses, the nurse suddenly rushed towards her, grabbed her by the hair, and pushed Zoe up against the wall. It was you! I saw you leaving my Mrs. room! You're the one who pulled out her ventilator! Why are you trying to hurt her? Zoe was startled and frightened by this sudden turn of events. Let go of me! Let go of my hair! It hurts! Why did these things keep happening to Zoe? Zoe screamed hysterically, and despite her best effort, some tears slipped out. As soon as Zoe finished her hysterical tirade, the nurse suddenly shouted at someone behind Zoe, Dr. Dexter! With red eyes, Zoe turned around in a daze and saw Blaine in his white coat. His gaze lightly fell on Zoe, who was in a sorry state. He looked cold and indifferent. Melinda, from now on, don't let this woman near Miss Quincy, Blaine said indifferently. There was no other expression on his face. Blaine ordered Zoe sternly. Stay away from Sophia in the future. The further, the better. With that, he walked into Sophia's room without looking back. Blaine trusted Zoe, which is why he wanted her to stay away from Sophia. It was the best way to protect her from further false accusations. Whether Zoe realized this or not was okay with Blaine, as long as she was safe. Over the weekend, Max's mournful wails echoed through his hospital room and Zoe's heart. She held his small body tightly in her soft embrace. It hurts, Mommy, it hurts so much. Mommy, make it stop! Max was screaming at the top of his lungs. His mournful wails were like hundreds of knives stabbing at Zoe's heart. Even though it would hurt many people, Zoe would do what she had to do to save her child. So as she clutched her screaming son, Zoe steeled her heart and made a decision. Blaine buzzed Zoe into his building. "You have something to talk to me about?" Blaine asked. Zoe licked her lips nervously, her mouth suddenly bone dry. She mustered the courage to speak with difficulty. Let me be your mistress." Zoe's words made Blaine's eyes narrow, and he immediately stared at Zoe as if he was looking at a monster. Blaine's dark eyes seemed to darken the longer she remained silent. "A mistress?" Zoe bit her lips. Her chest felt tight as if something was squeezing it too hard, making it difficult for her to breathe. Then she found herself nodding as she replied, "Yes." Blaine shook his head and chuckled carelessly. "Stop teasing me. You must think I'm a fool." Zoe's face paled. Blaine's harsh assessment hit her like a physical blow. "Explain yourself, Zoe. What do you want from me?" Zoe stared at him for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "Money." Zoe took a deep breath and then mustered up her courage. She repeated herself, louder this time. "I want money." Zoe clearly saw Blaine's eyebrows jump at her words. "Say that again," Blaine ordered through gritted teeth as he looked down at Zoe. Blaine seemed like a ferocious beast about to attack, and Zoe suppressed a shiver. Zoe bit her lips in silence. Blaine's voice suddenly rose a few decibels. Blaine asked Zoe harshly, "Where's Matthew?" "At the hospital." Zoe knew why Blaine was asking this, but she could only try to change the subject. Blaine glared at her fiercely, his voice rising. "Call him." Blaine took his cell phone out of his pocket and dropped it at Zoe's feet. "Call him." Zoe had never seen Blaine this angry before. She knew if Matthew were here right now, Blaine wouldn't hesitate to punch him. With a pale face, Zoe refused to move. "We're divorced." "It's been a long time." Zoe licked her lips and added, "It's been many years." Blaine didn't know what to think when he heard Zoe's words. "How much?" he asked Zoe. Zoe blinked, stunned. "How much do you need for your relative's treatments?" Blaine repeated patiently. Zoe took a deep breath and licked her lips. "Blaine, my offer still stands. I hope you will consider it again." After 2 weeks in the hospital, Sophia was finally improving. Blaine had his hands in the pockets of his white coat when he entered Sophia's room. Finally, Blaine spoke. "Sophia, now that you are feeling better, I think it's time you and I talked." Blaine's voice was cold as he informed Sophia they needed to talk. "Blaine, what do you want to talk about?" she asked, trying to hide her anxiety. "I want to talk about what happened at the picnic, inviting the Fuller sisters, drugging and cornering me in the trap, stabbing Zoe's hand with a brooch so she'd be blamed for your fall and thrown in jail. Sounds familiar, Sophia?" "Are you sure Zoe didn't plot these things?" Sophia yelled at his back, unwilling to give up. Blaine looked back at Sophia calmly. "There's not a doubt in my mind that she had nothing to do with this, because a woman as proud as Zoe would never betray her soul for a man." Sophia took in a deep breath. "Blaine, if you really love Zoe that much, I can ask your mother to break off our engagement. You know, I'm not that kind of person." Blaine looked at Sophia's gentle smile, and the color in his eyes deepened. All he said was, "Rest well." "Sophia!" At that moment, Ziva walked in and immediately saw Blaine, who was about to leave, and said, "Dr. Dexter, hello!" She greeted him as her eyes lit up. Blaine didn't bother to answer her. "You guys go ahead and chat. I'll be leaving now." "Blaine!" Sophia called out to him again. "Would you mind taking Ziva home? She has a stack of fashion magazines she wants to lend me to pass the time. You can bring them back to me when you return to the hospital. There's still half an hour before I get off work. I'll come to find you when I'm done." Blaine looked at Ziva as he said this. Then he turned around and walked out of the room. A half hour later, Blaine left with Ziva to drive her home. Along the way, Blaine remained silent. He only focused on driving, but Ziva hadn't stopped talking since they'd met up. After all, being alone with Blaine was too good an opportunity to pass up. Seeing that they were almost home, Ziva became a little anxious. Just as Ziva was getting anxious, surprisingly, it was Blaine who asked her a question. Is one of your family members sick? His sudden question stunned Ziva for a moment. She nodded hesitantly. It's my... Ziva was interrupted by her ringing phone. She apologetically smiled and said, Just a minute, let me take this call. Ziva, are you going to be home soon? Zoe asked her over the phone. I'm almost there. See you in a minute, sis. Ziva hung up the phone and turned around to look at Blaine. Dr. Dexter, do you want to come over to our place for dinner? It's time for dinner, isn't it? Blaine already knew this, of course. Zoe's excellent culinary skills tempted him. Ziva was shocked when Blaine simply said, All right. When Blaine walked in her front door, Zoe froze in shock. Blaine was dressed casually in a sweater and dark jeans, but his tall, refined presence seemed to clash with his simple surroundings. Good evening, Mrs. Fuller. Ziva, who is your guest? Come in and have a seat. Mom, this is Dr. Blaine Dexter. Dr. Dexter, this is my mother, Gloria Fuller. Ziva happily introduced them. Mom? Seeing Gloria staring at Blaine in a daze, Ziva couldn't help but laugh. Mom, don't stare at him, it's so rude. Gloria came back to her senses. She smiled with some uneasiness as she nodded in agreement. Yes, sorry. Come, let's sit down. Dr. Dexter, right? Gloria called Blaine into the dining room. Zoe followed silently. Please, call me Blaine, he told her politely. The four of them took their places at the dining room table. Zoe sat silently eating while Ziva kept up a constant stream of chatter. Dr. Dexter, have you tried a bite of the lasagna yet? My sister makes it from scratch. It's really delicious. Gloria looked at Blaine across the table. Tell me about yourself, Dr. Dexter. What is your family background? Mom? Ziva pushed her mother's arm. What are you doing? You sound like you're interrogating him. This time, Gloria ignored Ziva. With a stern face, she pushed Ziva's hand away unhappily and scolded. What harm is there in asking the man about his family? My father is a government official, Blaine diplomatically replied. A government official? Mom, his father is Senator Michael Dexter of Arizona. Ziva quickly elaborated. Dr. Dexter, no need to be so modest. Gloria stiffened when she heard Ziva's words. Your father is Senator Dexter? Dr. Dexter is indeed from an influential and wealthy family. I'm surprised to find you at our humble table. Blaine didn't expect Gloria to say such a thing. He frowned as he glanced at Zoe, who was sitting beside him. Ziva's face immediately changed. Dr. Dexter isn't the kind of person who cares if people are rich or poor. If he was, he wouldn't have come home to eat with me today. Gloria seemed to be angry, and her voice rose a few decibels. Don't mind me. I can be such a straightforward person. From now on, you don't have to interact with my Ziva anymore. Our family situation is clearly not compatible with yours. Mom! Ziva threw down her napkin as her eyes turned red. How can you say such a thing? I finally managed to get on better terms with Dr. Dexter, and you're already pulling me back. How can you do this to me? Ziva's eyes teared up after she shouted. After she finished speaking, she rushed into her room while crying. The already tattered door was now making creaking sounds as it was thrown shut by her. Mom, I'll go check on her. Zoe was about to leave when she was stopped by Gloria. Sit down. Gloria slapped the table with her hand. Zoe's eyes widened in surprise. Mrs. Fuller, thank you for dinner. Sorry to have bothered you this evening. Blaine was shocked by Gloria's actions. It's not worth it to hurt the relationship between you and your daughter over me. I'm leaving. I'll just walk myself out. Blaine looked at Gloria and frowned. Obviously, coming here tonight had been a mistake, but not for any reason he might have expected. Zoe escorted Blaine outside to his car. Does your mother discriminate against all rich people or just the ones with political connections? Blaine couldn't help but ask Zoe. Zoe was confused by her mother's reaction. She shook her head and said, No, I've never seen her act this way before. I honestly don't know what's gotten into her tonight. Go inside. Blaine gestured toward her house. Zoe nodded and looked at him, her blue eyes soft with unspoken emotion. Before she habitually reminded him, Drive carefully on the road. I will. A faint glimmer appeared in Blaine's eyes. It was clearly a hint of happiness. Bye. Zoe waved her hand at him, a faint unwillingness to part in her eyes. She turned and headed inside. When Zoe came back inside after walking Blaine out, she saw her mother sitting in a daze, and Ziva was still locked in her room. "Sit down. I still have something to tell you," Gloria ordered Zoe, pointing at a chair. Zoe didn't dare to disobey, so she had no choice but to sit down and listen. "The day before yesterday, your Aunt Shelley came by to see you. She said that she wanted to introduce you to a man with good education and good character." Gloria's temper was a little explosive today. Zoe naturally understood her mother's anger and also understood how much her mother worried about her. It looked like she wasn't going to be able to get out of the date. "Okay, tell Aunt Shelley I'll meet the man for coffee this weekend." "Excuse me, is Dr. Dexter here?" Hearing Max's familiar voice, Blaine looked up in shock. "Max?" Astonished, he put down the document in his hand and stood up. Max lowered his head even further and said in his childish voice, "Dr. Dexter, I've come to say goodbye to you." "Say goodbye?" Blaine's heart tightened. "Max is being moved to another hospital." "I see." Blaine nodded, feeling disappointed. "Dr. Dexter, will you come and see me?" Suddenly, the little boy raised his head and asked Blaine with a look of anticipation. "Next month is my birthday. Dr. Dexter, can you come and celebrate with me?" "All right." Blaine nodded as he answered with a smile. Max reached out his little arms and hugged Blaine's broad shoulders, rubbing his neck with his little face. "I have to go now." His childish voice was clearly reluctant. The next afternoon, Blaine made his way to the nurse's station on the 10th floor of the hospital. He asked the nurse, "Could you please help me check if there is a patient with the last name Fuller on the 10th floor?" Zoe was stunned for a long moment when she saw him. After a moment, she walked over to Blaine. "You're looking for me?" Blaine put his hands in his pockets and nodded. "Yes, I came to check on your family member." He didn't try to hide it. Zoe was slightly taken aback, a trace of unease flitting past her eyes. She smiled and said, "Thank you, but we had already transferred out yesterday." Blaine nodded in understanding but still didn't show much emotion on his face. Blaine didn't say anything and just nodded to her as he walked past Zoe straight into the elevator. Zoe sipped her tea as she waited for her blind date to arrive at the coffee shop. When Zoe saw a middle-aged man in his 50s with a paunch and an obvious toupee on his head approach her, she wanted to bolt, but it was too late. The man had spotted Zoe and hurried over to greet her. This man was at least twice Zoe's age. "Zoe Fuller, right?" The man greeted her in a booming voice. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Roger Turner." Zoe politely stood and greeted him. "Hello, Mr. Turner, nice to meet you." Then Zoe shook the man's very sweaty hand. "Zoe, your skin is so soft. Are you sure you're a mother? You seem so young and fresh." Hearing this, Zoe felt disgusted. Ew! She hoped no one noticed them together. However, Zoe didn't know that it was already too late for that. A pair of stormy gray eyes were watching this scene unfold through the coffee shop's window. "That's it," Blaine said under his breath. Jose was confused. Jose followed Blaine into the coffee shop. As soon as they entered, they bumped into Zoe, who was sitting by the window. Jose immediately understood why they were there. "Hey Zoe, what a coincidence!" Zoe smiled awkwardly and greeted Jose unnaturally. "What a coincidence!" "Zoe, are these friends of yours?" Roger quickly stood up and politely shook hands with Jose. "Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Zoe's boyfriend, Roger Turner." Zoe was so embarrassed that she felt ashamed. "Don't misunderstand. I just met Mr. Turner a few minutes ago." "Zoe, stop acting reserved," Roger corrected her. Zoe felt a prickling sensation on her back, and her whole body was uncomfortable. She noticed Jose and Blaine hadn't budged and were still standing in front of the table, watching the show. "Mr. Turner, I really don't think that—" Before Zoe could finish her sentence, she was cut off by Roger, who grabbed her hand with his sweaty own. "Let go of me!" Zoe struggled to pull her hand back, but couldn't break free, and she was quickly moving from feeling embarrassed to angry. However, before she could say anything, a big hand had already fiercely slapped Roger's hand away, causing him to grimace in pain. Blaine only glared at him coldly. Roger's face was flushed bright red as he glared while pointing his finger at her. "Just wait until I tell your mother and aunt what kind of woman you really are." Zoe panicked. She opened her mouth to try to reason with Roger, but he didn't give her a chance to speak. He turned around and dashed out of the coffee shop. "Zoe, where are you going?" Blaine sounded furious. "Let me go!" Zoe was so anxious that she tried to shake off his hand. "I have to apologize so he doesn't tell my—" Before Zoe could say the word mom, she was interrupted by Blaine's incredulous shout. "What do you mean, apologize to him?" Blaine pulled Zoe towards the parking lot. Zoe's wrist ached as she was fiercely tugged along by him. The flustered Zoe repeated her question. "Where are you taking me?" Blaine curled his lips and said with determination, "Zoe, I accept your offer. If you really want to be my mistress, then I'll give you the chance to start right now. Get in," he ordered her, his face cold as he held the door open for her. "Get in," he ordered her, his face cold as he held the door open for her. Zoe bit her lips and looked at him with the slightest bit of hesitation. "What, scared?" Blaine raised his eyebrows mockingly. Zoe pursed her lips, suppressed the panic in her heart, and got into the car. However, before she could make a decision, a powerful arm suddenly wrapped around her slim waist. With little effort on his part, Zoe's entire body was easily scooped up by Blaine. A satisfied smile appeared on Blaine's face. The car drove slowly back to his place. Zoe was so tired she fell asleep. Zoe didn't know how long she had slept. When she finally woke up, her body was soft and she felt extremely relaxed. However, her arms felt like they were being pressed down by something heavy. It felt warm and hard. She opened her eyes in a daze and found that she was lying on Blaine's large bed. The first thing Zoe saw when she opened her eyes was Blaine's flawless sleeping face. The moment Blaine woke up, his eyes immediately tightly locked onto hers. There was not even a trace of sleepiness in his eyes. Zoe almost suspected that this man had only been pretending to be asleep. Zoe immediately retracted her hand as if she had done something bad and got caught red-handed. She had an awkward expression on her face as she revealed a shy smile. "You're awake?" He smiled wickedly and reached out and teasingly pinched Zoe's cheek, which was as red as a tomato. "I'm hungry. After you take a bath, cook for me." His casual actions were like a joke between a couple. It made Zoe's heart flutter. Zoe pretended to be calm as she pouted and said unhappily, "I'm not your nanny." "Mistresses are not responsible for the filling of the stomach?" he asked her. Zoe looked away disgruntled. With regards to the word mistress, it was obvious that she was not used to being referred to as such. Blaine smiled evilly, his fingers teasingly caressing her cheek, moving along her forehead to her ear. "Since you can't solve the problem of food and drink, then I can only let you first solve the problem of warmth for me." Zoe's eyes widened and her face turned red. She anxiously rolled up her blanket, got off the bed, and surrendered. All right, stop messing around. Would you like me to cook for you, Blaine?" "Great idea, Zoe." He grinned. He figured after eating and drinking to their heart's content, they would have the energy to return to bed and not sleep. "Can I borrow some clothes?" Zoe asked as she moved towards the bathroom. Blaine closed his eyes and lay back on the pillows. He said, "Pick whatever you want out of my closet." Zoe walked into the closet with the blanket in her arms. After showering and putting on one of his white button-down shirts, Zoe walked back into the bedroom, drying her hair with the towel in her hand. But Blaine was gone. She suspiciously left the bedroom. Blaine patted Zoe's back and said, "Go and dry the rest with a blow-dryer." As she was searching in the cupboard for the dryer, Zoe saw a black shadow approaching from behind her, and she felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Zoe was about to turn around when she felt strong arms wrap around her waist, and her entire body was pulled back from behind, tightly shackling her to Blaine's strong chest. "Blaine, what are you doing?" Zoe asked him as she struggled for balance, having been pulled up on her tiptoes. "I want you." His rough voice resounded from behind her. He was a man of almost 30, yet the moment he saw her, he immediately went back to being an impulsive and randy teenager. He kept wanting her over and over again, to the point that he didn't even want food, only her. Zoe opened her eyes in a daze and asked weakly, "What time is it now?" "It's past 10. "Huh?" When Zoe heard the time, she grabbed the blanket and covered her chest, warning him. "Don't even think about it, Blaine." She anxiously looked around and asked, "Where is my bag?" Blaine seemed to be worried that she would leave at any moment. "What's wrong?" "My cell phone is in my bag." Anxiety was written all over Zoe's face. "This is bad." Zoe grabbed her cell phone and glanced at it. Zoe pouted and shushed him. "I need to call my mother. Don't make a sound." When Zoe said this, she suddenly felt a rock-hard arm wrap around her waist and tighten. Her delicate body was then pulled back into Blaine's strong embrace. Blaine didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. Blaine was staking his claim. Blaine was telling Zoe in no uncertain terms that she belonged to him. Zoe was still on the phone with her mother when Blaine's arms wrapped around her waist possessively. "Mom, look, bottom line, my blind date was an obnoxious jerk, and Aunt Shelley should have known not to set us up in the first place. I'll tell you all the details when I get home. Is that okay?" Zoe then quickly disconnected the call. Zoe heaved a sigh of relief when she realized that her mother hadn't seemed to notice anything unusual during their call. Zoe was a little surprised when she saw the serious expression on Blaine's face. She sighed and pouted. "I can't possibly tell my mom that you were one of the 2 men who helped me." "Why? Am I the devil or a woman-chasing monster?" Blaine's dark eyes glimmered. Zoe hesitated for a moment but finally told him the truth. "She told us to stay away from you." Hearing Zoe's explanation, Blaine raised his eyebrows. She thought he was going to say something in reply, but after a pause, he just said, "I'm hungry." It was clear to Zoe that Blaine was unhappy to hear that her mother didn't approve of him. He was just trying to hide his discomfort. No one liked to hear that someone didn't like them, but then again, this was Blaine. After taking a deep breath, she said, "I hope, that no third person knows what's going on between us, especially Sophia and my family." Zoe's voice grew softer as she finished speaking. Blaine didn't reply. After a long moment of awkward silence, Zoe heard him chuckle. He leaned over her slightly flustered face, raised his eyebrows, and said with a smile, "You mean you want me to agree to have a clandestine affair with you? Is that what you're saying?" The smile on Blaine's face did not reach his eyes. Zoe bit her lips and didn't respond. "Yes or no?" Blaine asked her again, and his tone became even colder. Zoe took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes." He rewarded Zoe with a single word: "Leave." Blaine walked out of the dining room, into the study, and slammed the door behind him. Zoe sat alone at the dining table, staring blankly at the study door Blaine had just slammed in her face. She didn't understand why Blaine was so angry. Zoe had remained silent when he'd presented his humiliating list of mistress rules to her, yet somehow, this still had made him angry. Unbelievable! Beginning to think Blaine didn't plan on coming out to talk to her, and too embarrassed to disturb him, Zoe decided to leave. She went in search of her clothes. When she checked the laundry room, she discovered that he had thrown her clothes into the washing machine. Great. Zoe sighed and walked out of the laundry room, feeling depressed. She curled up on the sofa and buried her head in her knees. She was stuck here until her clothes were washed and dried, and since it was now past midnight, it looked like she wouldn't be going home until morning. It was almost 2 a.m. when Blaine finally finished organizing the research paper he needed to submit in 2 days. He'd buried himself in work to distract himself from thoughts of the woman in the other room. Standing up, he shut his laptop and walked out of the study. Blaine went straight to the bedroom. When he saw the empty bed, he frowned. He turned around and walked back into the hall. As soon as he entered the living room, he saw Zoe, who had curled herself up into a ball and fallen asleep on the couch. Blaine walked over and bent down to pick her up. He stretched out his arm and wrapped one of his arms around Zoe's waist, while the other wrapped around her knees. He then carried her easily into the bedroom. After entering the bedroom, Blaine carefully placed her on the bed. As soon as Zoe felt the bed under her, she unconsciously hugged the soft blanket before tossing and turning several times to get comfortable. Finally, she tucked the blanket between her legs and sighed happily. Blaine watched her helplessly with a smile. Sighing, Blaine still let Zoe sleep. Even though he desperately wanted her, he had tortured her enough tonight. That night, she slept soundly. She didn't think she had slept so peacefully in 4 years. Zoe hadn't expected that their relationship would suddenly turn into this. Although she had imagined what becoming his mistress might be like, she hadn't expected the warmth between them. She had missed their connection. She couldn't deny it, no matter how hard she tried. But what if she was pregnant? Where would they go from here? Should she let go and let him return to his path? Zoe didn't know if she could let go a second time. Zoe was staring blankly at the computer. It was as if nothing had happened between them. The warmth of their night together was like a pleasant dream that Zoe didn't want to wake up from. But the cold reality was that with each day that passed with no word from Blaine, it seemed more and more likely Zoe wouldn't hear from him again. Zoe had left work early to meet a client at a cafe downtown. After she finished her meeting, Zoe walked outside and discovered it was starting to drizzle. Deciding to try to ride out the worst of it, Zoe ducked under the awning of the drugstore on the corner. Shaking out her purse and trying to wipe the rain off her face with her hand, Zoe looked up, and that's when she saw him. Blaine. He was across the street. Zoe was delighted and was ready to cross the street and greet him, but unexpectedly, Blaine suddenly stopped when a beautiful woman rushed under his umbrella and hugged him tightly. And Blaine didn't push away the woman in his embrace. Instead, he reached out and hugged her back. Zoe was stunned. Zoe could hear the sound of her heart splitting in two as she watched them. Zoe felt as if something heavy was wrapping around her chest. She took a deep breath and felt a sharp pain in her heart. It was well after midnight when Zoe left Max's new hospital and was about to go home, when her phone vibrated in her purse and a text message popped up. It was a message from Blaine. Zoe was surprised. The information was simple and concise. Come to the hospital in 10 minutes. Zoe was speechless. How did he know she was only 10 minutes away? Although Blaine had said that Zoe, as his mistress, had to do as he wished, she disagreed. Not to mention that after what she had witnessed earlier, she was not in the mood to resume their affair. Zoe didn't want to see Blaine's face, let alone sleep with him. Zoe's phone vibrated with another text. Blaine again. It's fine if you don't come, but you will default on our agreement and your credit card will be suspended. Zoe felt a headache starting. Was Blaine torturing her on purpose? She didn't know what was on his mind. She felt she had no choice. So Zoe turned the car around and headed to St. Mary's Hospital. As she drove, she reminded herself that this was for Max. There was nothing else between her and Blaine. There couldn't be. He has nothing to do with you. Standing outside their office's glass door, she saw him chatting happily with David and Jose. Then, as if he sensed Zoe's presence outside the door, Blaine suddenly turned around and his gaze fell on Zoe's expressionless face. Zoe hated this. She felt he was treating her like a pet dog, expecting her to come when he called. She slightly straightened her body and waited for him to get close. Zoe curled her lips and said with an expressionless face, "You owe me money for the gas to get here." Blaine narrowed his eyes, crossed his arms over his chest, and clucked his tongue in disbelief. "Zoe, you are really something else." "Yes, I'm just low class and common, aren't I? How can someone like me compare to the high society ladies, right?" Zoe blurted out, not even thinking about what she was saying and instantly wanting to take her words back. Damn it, Zoe thought. Now she sounded jealous. Zoe waved her hands in front of her. "Blaine, never mind. I don't need you to escort me out. Forget the gas money. This one's on me." Blaine dragged the still reluctant Zoe out of the hospital and into the parking lot. They walked silently until they reached Zoe's car, and she unlocked the door. "You saw me this afternoon?" Blaine casually asked Zoe. Zoe was stunned for a second. "I'm not blind, and she's not transparent," she said indifferently. Blaine's fingers tapped rhythmically on the top of Zoe's car door. He tilted his head to the side and asked Zoe with a smile, "Jealous?" "Jealous? Why would I be jealous?" Zoe smirked, concealing the unhappiness in her heart. Wasn't mistress rule number 1 that it's none of my business who else you sleep with? As soon as Zoe finished speaking, Blaine's smile vanished and his face darkened. He was angry. For a moment, Blaine looked like he was about to say something to Zoe, but then he just slapped the roof of her car, turned, and walked away. When Zoe returned home, she was surprised to find that Ziva was still awake. As the news went to commercial break, Zoe asked, "Ziva, why are you still up? It's so late." Ziva looked bitterly at Zoe. "Sis, Dr. Dexter will be heading to the front lines of Mexico City to provide medical support tomorrow." "What?" Zoe was stunned. She looked at her sister in astonishment, thinking she had misheard. Ziva pointed at the news on the television, her face filled with unsympathetic tears. "It's this crappy place. St. Mary's Hospital has a sister hospital in Mexico City, and they've requested urgent assistance. Because of the falling debris, many of the injured have head injuries. The hospital there particularly requested brain surgeons and others familiar with various head traumas, and Dr. Dexter volunteered. He leaves at 6 a.m. tomorrow." Zoe was surprised and couldn't help but ask, "What time is his plane?" 6 o'clock, Ziva answered without thinking. Zoe tried to sleep that night, but she couldn't. After she heard Ziva leave for the airport, she lay there for a few minutes before throwing off her covers. Zoe couldn't help herself. She quickly got dressed and followed Ziva to the airport. From her hiding place, Zoe nervously watched where Blaine stood with a circle of friends. He was about to board the plane and everyone was saying their final goodbyes. She watched as Sophia threw herself into Blaine's arms and refused to come out despite everyone's eyes on her. Blaine scanned the terminal again. Seeing the other passengers boarding the plane, he swung his backpack over his shoulder and headed to the gate's security checkpoint. When Zoe saw Blaine's tall, straight figure disappear into the crowd of passengers, she couldn't stop the heavy disappointment she felt. He was leaving, and she hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye. After hearing the call for final boarding, Zoe prepared to leave. Suddenly, she felt a tight grip on her waist as Blaine pulled her into his embrace again. Blaine bent his head, his face close to hers, and ordered her in a low voice, "Kiss me, Zoe." When Blaine asked Zoe to kiss him goodbye, she immediately blushed in embarrassment. They were standing in the middle of a busy airport terminal. She didn't dare. Did she? She could feel Blaine's hand tightening on her waist as he stared at her with his expectant eyes. It's time for you to board the plane," Zoe reminded him. She was so nervous she was stuttering. Blaine ignored her. Instead, he patiently waited for Zoe to kiss him. She had never seen Blaine display this much patience before. She could clearly hear the rapid and rhythmic sound of his heart pounding against her own. Zoe closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she rose on her tiptoes and moved her face towards Blaine. Then she kissed him with a kiss as soft and light as a butterfly's. It had been a very, very long time since Zoe had been the one to kiss him. A dazzling smile appeared on Blaine's usually indifferent face. He teasingly curled the corner of his lips and scolded her. Stingy. Zoe's face had already turned completely red. She reached out to push him away, but Blaine didn't give her the chance. He held her tightly in his arms and whispered, "Stay another moment. I'm about to board the plane." When Zoe heard this, she obediently let him hug her, no longer trying to pull away. Feeling the warmth of Blaine's arms, Zoe suddenly felt sentimental. She couldn't deny that she was going to miss him and that the thought of not seeing him for so many days made her sad. Without even making a conscious decision, Zoe hugged Blaine back tightly. She heard him say in her ear, "Take good care of yourself while I'm gone. Use my card if you need to. There's no limit, so take whatever you need." Listening to him, Zoe was visibly moved. She quietly withdrew from Blaine's arms and shook her head. "I'm fine, but thank you, I will." Zoe was telling the truth. Of course, when it came to Max's medical expenses, sometimes Zoe really needed money. But at the moment, she was okay. She had used Blaine's card, but had carefully recorded the amount so she could pay him back someday. Blaine was happy to hear Zoe say this. Good girl. He reached out his hand and, with his thumb, gently stroked Zoe's cheek. "I should go." All the passengers were on the plane and it was time for him to board. Yes. Zoe nodded, feeling disappointed their time together had been so fleeting. Her chest felt stuffy, and she suddenly felt unwell. Zoe took a deep breath as she watched his tall figure disappear through the plane's entrance. Her nose burned, and she felt her eyes grow wet. She really couldn't bear to part with him. Zoe didn't leave the airport until she saw Blaine's plane pull out and taxi away. As she walked out of the terminal, she realized the weather was now warmer. But Zoe felt herself shiver, as if her whole body had turned colder once Blaine left. She didn't hear from Blaine for the rest of the day, not even a quick message telling her he had arrived. Zoe had tried to call him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. He probably didn't have service, which would be normal in a disaster zone. After spending the evening with Max, Zoe left the hospital and went home. As soon as she entered the house, she turned on the TV and switched to a cable news channel. They were still reporting around the clock about the tragedy in Mexico. Zoe involuntarily shuddered as she listened. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, an aftershock with a magnitude of 4.9 occurred in Mexico City. This is the fifth aftershock of magnitude 4 or more since the original quake. The number of missing people increased by 121. Volunteer rescue workers and medical personnel are pouring into the city, doing their utmost to rescue and treat the injured. Zoe felt a little dizzy while watching the reports. Each image shown seemed more disturbing than the last. All the news was gloomy, and other than making her mood worse, watching the news coverage wasn't helping her feel any better. Annoyed, she stood up and turned off the television. She went to her bedroom and then took a shower. She stood under the hot spray for a long time, allowing the warm water to wash over her. Zoe hoped that the water would also wash away the heaviness in her heart, but she couldn't shake her worries no matter how hard she tried. Hoping some sleep would make her feel better, Zoe crawled into bed. But even though she'd barely slept the night before, Zoe found herself tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. She checked her phone, but there were no new messages or texts. Fearing she might miss a call if she fell asleep, Zoe tucked the phone under her pillow and dejectedly closed her eyes to try to get some sleep. Zoe's mind, however, couldn't rest. It was too filled with thoughts of Blaine. What was he doing? Had he safely arrived in Mexico City? Had they gone straight to work, or was he able to rest first? Did he have a safe place to sleep? Did they have enough food and warm clothing? The questions just kept coming and wouldn't stop. Zoe sat up in frustration and rubbed her head with her hands. "I'm going crazy," she said out loud before flopping back onto the bed and covering her head with the blanket, as if that might block out her anxious thoughts. In her frazzled state, it took Zoe a long moment to realize the sound she suddenly heard was her cell phone ringing. Was she dreaming? No, it was definitely ringing, but by the time she found it, the ringing had stopped. Damn it! Zoe anxiously cursed to herself. She swiped through the missed call log. Her fingers were still trembling as they landed on the screen. She had a call from an unknown number, but the call had come from a Mexico City area code. Blaine had called. Zoe quickly called back and anxiously waited for him to pick up. Zoe let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding in a frustrated puff when the cold, mechanical voice answered the phone. "Sorry, the number you dialed is temporarily out of service. Please hang up and try again later." Beep, beep, beep. Zoe slammed her hand down on the pillow. No, no, no! She couldn't have missed Blaine's call. She quickly hung up the phone and dialed again. This time the phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. Zoe was about to hang up in despair when suddenly a deep, magnetic voice filled her ears. "It's me." All of Zoe's anxiety disappeared at the sound of Blaine's voice. All that was left was the pain and emotion that had settled in her heart. "I thought you weren't going to answer the phone." Zoe's voice cracked as she held back her sobs of relief. "I left, but then I came back," Blaine told her. "After I called and you didn't pick up, I figured you had gone to bed, and I didn't want to wake you. But after I started walking away, I decided to turn back, and then I heard the phone ringing." Blaine didn't tell Zoe that he had to walk several miles to a payphone to make his call, and he wanted to hear her voice before he returned to camp. "I tried calling you, but it said your cell phone wasn't in service," Zoe softly said as she snuggled under the covers to talk to him. her relief palpable. After hearing his voice, her heart stopped racing, and she even found herself smiling.
There's no cell service. All cell towers are down, and only emergency calls are routed through.
Blaine explained. Zoe was surprised. How did you call me without a signal? She asked. Blaine chuckled softly.
Of course, I have my ways.
Zoe couldn't help but laugh too before asking him, "How are things going there?"
Not good.
Blaine answered her without thinking. Zoe frowned and asked anxiously, "Why?"
Because you're not here.
His deep voice settled over Zoe like a warm blanket, and his words made her feel like she was floating on a cloud. She opened her mouth to try to speak, but no words came out.
I'm kidding. Don't get all mushy on me.
Blaine's teasing voice instantly pulled Zoe back to reality. Zoe went from floating on a cloud to crashing back down to earth. She rolled her eyes even though he couldn't see her. Since when did you become so fond of joking? Blaine ignored her question. He answered her last question instead, more seriously.
I'm doing well here. The food isn't great, but I'll make do.
I saw on the news that there have been a lot of aftershocks, so you have to be careful, okay? Zoe's concern for him was obvious from the tone of her voice, and Blaine smiled.
I promise I'll be careful and that I will return safely.
He knew that by giving Zoe his guarantee, she would be able to calm down.
Did I wake you up?
Blaine asked her, then continued.
In the future, I'll try my best to call you earlier, but with so many injuries to treat, it might be past midnight by the time I'm done. I'll be doing back-to-back surgeries all day. If it's really late, don't wait for my call.
Blaine knew how hard Zoe worked and wanted to ensure she got enough sleep versus staying up late waiting for his call. Zoe smiled that Blaine was worried about her while in a disaster zone. Her heart felt warm and a bit giddy. No worries, I'll understand if you don't call. Just stay safe.
It's late. Go to sleep. You still have to work in the morning.
Blaine coaxed her in a low voice. Zoe nuzzled her head into the blanket and nodded obediently. You should go back and rest as well.
Okay, let's hang up.
Blaine urged her. You hang up first. Zoe replied, smiling. Blaine chuckled into the phone.
Ladies first. As a man of noble character, it wouldn't be chivalrous of me to hang up first.
Fine. Zoe knew that she wouldn't win, so she laughed helplessly. And then I'll hang up first. Good night. After she ended the call, Zoe stared at the phone in her hand for a long time. Her mind reflected on every word Blaine had just said to her. Suddenly, Zoe felt as if she'd gone back in time, and it was 4 years ago. The last voice she had heard every night had been Blaine's when they'd been together. Back then, they'd also been reluctant to end their calls, encouraging each other to hang up first. On his end, Blaine stayed on the phone longer than necessary, making sure Zoe had really hung up. He was admittedly a little disappointed when he realized she had, although he'd insisted. Blaine couldn't help but laugh at himself as he exited the phone booth. He looked around at the deserted street, tightened his coat, and began the trek back to the field hospital. When Blaine returned to their tent, he accidentally woke Jose, who was bunking with him. Jose sat up and looked at Blaine in shock. Where did you go? It's so late. He looked at the time on his phone. It was almost 2 a.m. Blaine took off his gloves and coat and replied lightly, I had to make a call. Jose looked at him in disbelief. A call? Our traffic still hasn't cleared. Where did you go to make this call? How did you get there? Just outside this district, and I walked. It was only a couple of miles away. Blaine replied blandly, obviously unwilling to share the details of his trip with Jose. A couple of miles? Seriously? Dude, it's pitch black outside with rubble everywhere, and you were in surgery for hours. Jose sat up and watched Blaine as he took off his boots and then used his canteen to wet a towel and wash his face. Jose smiled knowingly. Dr. Dexter, I think you went on this late-night jaunt of yours to call Zoe. Am I right? I heard you asked the locals several times today if they knew of anywhere that had phone service. Look at you, so devoted. Blaine glanced at Jose coldly, then threw the wet towel in his hand at Jose's gossipy face when he burst out laughing. It's none of your business. Go back to sleep. Jose grabbed the towel from his face and smiled even more arrogantly. Oh, now I know I'm right. Come on, admit it. You've got it bad for that woman. It's so obvious. But Blaine just got into his sleeping bag, turned off the lantern, and ignored the still laughing Jose. After that first night, Zoe came to expect Blaine's nightly phone calls from Mexico City. His reports were largely positive. Blaine would tell Zoe how many people he'd been able to save on his operating table and the additional good news of rescue operations he heard had been successful. He would also tell her that sufficient supplies were beginning to arrive in the city and that more roads and highways were cleared. Their phone calls were usually no longer than 15 minutes, sometimes much less. Zoe understood that Blaine didn't want to disrupt her sleep, and she knew that the intensity of his days meant he also needed to rest. But she couldn't help wishing they were longer. Zoe had long ago admitted to herself, if not him, how much she missed him. Still, even a short call from Blaine helped to alleviate her worries, and she found that after hearing Blaine's voice each night, she would quickly drift off to sleep after they hung up the phone. Until the night Blaine's phone calls stopped. Zoe waited and waited that night, but Blaine didn't call, and Zoe barely slept. She tried to rationalize not hearing from Blaine. She told herself he was working especially late or had fallen asleep early by mistake, but Zoe couldn't stop her growing dread. By the next evening, as she paced the hospital corridor outside of Max's hospital room, she felt herself growing more and more panicked. She couldn't calm herself down no matter how hard she tried. Seeing that Max was asleep, Zoe slipped into the empty visitors' lounge and changed the TV hanging on the wall to a cable news channel. It was the top of the hour, and Zoe felt a chill go down her spine as she listened to the news anchor report the top story. There is more disturbing news out of Mexico City today as aftershocks of the 8.1 earthquake that devastated the region have continued to be a cause for concern. We are receiving reports that last night at approximately 1 o'clock a.m., another aftershock of 5.1 rocked the city, with 43 new missing persons reported and 4 new deaths adding to the already devastating casualty numbers in the country. Zoe's whole body began to shiver, and it felt as if the entire hospital's temperature had dropped 20 degrees and her hands were cold. The news anchor said the aftershock had hit at 1 o'clock a.m. last night, around the time Blaine usually called her. Could he have been caught in an aftershock? Zoe checked her watch. It was 10 o'clock p.m. She told herself last night was just a fluke, a horrible coincidence, and that he would call tonight. Still shivering, Zoe returned to Max's hospital room and lay down on the bed alongside their son. Max immediately rolled over and snuggled into her, never waking, and Zoe felt some of her chills disappear. She clutched her phone in one hand and wrapped her arms tightly around her sleeping son as she settled in to wait for Blaine to call. If he called. At that thought, Zoe couldn't hold back any longer, and her tears began to flow uncontrollably. Clutching Max, Zoe whispered into his little ear, "Sweetheart, pray with Mommy that Daddy will return home safely." Her voice was choked with sobs. More and more tears flowed as she held her sleeping son. Was it Zoe's fate to have all the people she loved taken away from her one by one? Was she destined to lose both the man she loved and their son? Zoe hardly slept all night. She soaked her pillow with tears and checked her phone more times than she could count. But another night passed with no call from Blaine. She could no longer deny what her gut told her was the truth. Something bad had happened. Those first 2 nights turned into 5 nights with no word from Blaine. It was as if he had vanished from Zoe's life. She had gone to St. Mary's to inquire about their team in Mexico City, but the hospital had no comment. Their only response was that communications out of Mexico City were erratic, and no one in Phoenix knew the exact situation on the ground in Mexico City. It was now the 6th day since Zoe had heard from Blaine, and she was sitting in front of her computer drawing blueprints in a daze. 10 minutes ago, she'd been told by Talon that she had made an error in the budget estimate she had already presented to her client, and the company would have to absorb the cost. It was the first time Zoe had ever made such an error, so Talon had been reasonable, if disappointed. Zoe offered to pay the difference out of her salary, but he'd said that Taylor Interiors would absorb the cost this time, but to be more careful in the future. Talon's thoughtful response only made Zoe feel guiltier. Not being able to control her emotions any longer, Zoe got up from her desk and went to the restroom. She locked the door behind her and cried while tearfully dialing Blaine's cell phone nonstop.
Sorry, the user you dialed is temporarily out of service. Please hang up and try again later.
Beep, beep, beep.
Sorry, the number you dialed is temporarily out of service. Please hang up and...
Zoe pressed the key again and again, and the same cold mechanical voice answered her. The voice sounded to Zoe as if it had come from the depths of hell, and her heart was in excruciating pain. She clutched her phone with both hands and left a message for Blaine while sobbing. Blaine, where are you? Hurry up and call me, okay? I can't do anything without you. I miss you so much. I really miss you so much. I miss you so much. Zoe's words were so choked with sobs, she knew that even if by some miracle Blaine got her message, he wouldn't be able to make out a word she was saying because of her uncontrollable weeping. After work, Zoe went to the supermarket even though she hadn't had an appetite for days. She was pushing her cart down the aisle in a daze when suddenly her cell phone rang. Ring! The ringtone sounded like the voice of hope as it urgently called out to Zoe. Zoe was shocked. She quickly dropped the items in her hands and grabbed her phone out of her purse. When she saw the caller ID, she was overjoyed, and her eyes immediately turned wet as a rush of excited thoughts went through her. The call was from Mexico City. It was the number of the phone booth he used. It was him. It was Blaine. Blaine was fine. Zoe hurriedly pressed the answer button and shouted into the phone, "Blaine!" "Zoe, it's me." A slightly unfamiliar voice responded, causing Zoe to be stunned momentarily. "It's Jose." "Jose?" Zoe immediately became apprehensive. Jose's voice was always high and lively. Why did he sound so depressed today? Why would you call me?" Zoe tried her best to relax her emotions so her tone didn't sound weird. However, her voice shook, betraying her emotions and her nervousness. She clutched the phone in her hands so hard, her fingers turned white. Zoe wanted to lie and sound calm, but she just couldn't. "Have you guessed why I'm calling?" Jose's muffled voice was hesitant. Every word he said was like a sharp blade slicing Zoe's chest, causing her pain. Tears were welling up in her eyes, but she tilted her head back, forcing herself not to cry. The sound was very obvious. "Please, just tell me the truth. How is he? When Zoe asked her question, her tears gushed out like a flood. "Zoe, right now, I'm standing in the phone booth where Dr. Dexter calls you every day." Jose's voice on the other end of the line was choked with sobs, and he had to pause before continuing. "Every night, as soon as he finished his last operation, Dr. Dexter would immediately leave to call you. He wouldn't even stop to eat. He'd walk for nearly 2 hours to this phone booth so he could tell you he was safe. Several times at 2 a.m, I would see him sitting in our tent eating a cold can of tuna fish and crackers. I asked him why he didn't call you after dinner, but he told me he couldn't wait that long." Jose's voice grew hoarser. 6 days ago, after he called you, there was a 5.1 aftershock. "Since then, we haven't seen Dr. Dexter again." While Jose spoke, Zoe slid down to her knees beside the supermarket shelves with her cell phone in her hand. She covered her mouth and sobbed, ignoring the looks of everyone around her. She had never known that for his phone call every night, Blaine would have to walk back and forth for hours in the dark, devastated streets. He hadn't even cared if he ate or slept, and now, because of her, Blaine was missing. Zoe put her hand into her mouth and bit down hard. She wanted to use the pain between her fingers to numb the pain in her heart. "Zoe, I'm not telling you this to make you blame yourself or to make you feel guilty. I just want to finish this for Dr. Dexter. He wouldn't want you to think he'd forgotten about you." Jose then went silent. Zoe knew that a grown man was crying on the other end of the phone. Finally, Jose spoke again. "We are already doing our best to search for him. If we don't find Dr. Dexter, it means he is still alive. Don't give up hope, Zoe." Zoe didn't remember hanging up the phone or how she got out of the supermarket, but Jose's words still echoed in her ears. She walked for hours as if doing so would somehow bring her closer to Blaine, as he'd spent hours walking for her. By the time Zoe returned home, her legs burned and her back ached, but she barely noticed because of the roaring pain in her heart. Zoe! When Gloria saw Zoe walk in, she paled. She had never seen her strong daughter look so broken. Zoe, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Has something happened? As soon as Zoe heard her mother's voice, her tears gushed out like a flood. Honey, what's wrong with you? You're scaring Mom. Zoe looked at her mother in a daze, unable to hold it in any longer. She threw herself into her mother's embrace and broke into fresh tears. Mom, I feel so bad. Zoe sobbed, clutching her heart, which was in extreme pain. She wished that she could cut it out with a knife. That way she might feel better. She was the one who endangered Blaine. If it weren't for her, Blaine wouldn't have gone to that place to call her and been caught in an aftershock. Zoe couldn't tell her mother about her relationship with Blaine, so she just cried silently in her mother's arms. Gloria guessed that Max's situation had taken its toll and just held her daughter, comforting her. In just 2 days, Zoe lost a whole lot of weight. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she hadn't slept for days. It was not because she didn't want to sleep, but because she truly couldn't. She would have loved to fall asleep and forget this waking nightmare, but she was terrified she'd miss a call. Zoe kept the phone in her hand day and night. When Zoe heard the news of Blaine's disappearance, her first thought was to fly to Mexico City and search for him herself. She would find him no matter what. She'd even gone so far as to check the limited flights available. But she realized this was foolish. She needed to stay in Phoenix and look after their son. Zoe had to trust in Jose and the rescue teams that they were doing everything they could to find Blaine. It had been a week, and Zoe had heard nothing. She was about to get off work when she suddenly received word that the St. Mary's team had returned from Mexico City. When Zoe heard the news, she didn't even take the time to pack up her things. She just grabbed her bag and ran out of her office without even saying goodbye to her colleagues. As soon as Zoe arrived at the hospital, she saw a white bus with the emblem of a charity organization parked in the hospital's circular front driveway. Zoe stood at a distance and frantically scanned the group of doctors, grabbing their bags and greeting loved ones, but Blaine wasn't among them. Blaine hadn't come home. The wind blew past Zoe's face, and her eyes blurred with tears. She felt as if she was drowning as she watched the crowd of smiling faces greeting one another. Zoe didn't dare to step forward and ask about Blaine. She just stood there dumbly, not moving at all. She kept imagining seeing Blaine's smiling face among the crowd. She didn't dare to think how she might never see his handsome face again. The phone in Zoe's hand vibrated with a new message. Lowering her head, she wiped her tears to read the message on her phone. When she read the text, Zoe was stunned for a long moment. Then she took off running. Zoe didn't even take the time to get her car out of the hospital's parking lot. Instead, she grabbed a taxi waiting out in front of the hospital. In the taxi, Zoe read the text message over and over. She didn't stop until her eyes were blurry with tears and she could no longer read the words. The text message was simple. Zoe, my house, 30 minutes. The message was from Blaine. His number, his domineering tone. He had returned. He really came back. Zoe was convinced that the taxi she was in was the slowest in existence. When they reached Blaine's building, she was halfway out the door of the cab before it even came to a full stop. She hurriedly handed the driver a 20 and bolted out of the car, not caring to wait for her change. When the elevator doors opened and Zoe saw the familiar tall and handsome figure in front of her, Zoe's eyes instantly became wet. Blaine leaned against the elevator door's frame, curled his lips, and smiled lazily at her. Then, before Zoe had time to react or say anything, she suddenly felt something tighten around her waist as a powerful arm pulled her into a firm chest. Blaine was home. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Zoe burst into tears. Blaine was home. He was safe. Zoe had been so afraid that she would never see Blaine again. She wrapped her arms around him and hugged him tightly. It was as if she was afraid if she didn't hold on, he might suddenly disappear again. Blaine was gratified when he felt Zoe's arms tighten around him, but at the same time, he couldn't help wincing in pain. Her tight embrace aggravated his injury, but he didn't say anything. Although it was painful, being held by her, no matter how much it hurt, was worth it. Stop crying. Blaine bent over and lowered his head, gently wiping away her tears. Zoe didn't say anything. She just kept crying, venting all of the painful feelings that had haunted her nights and days so much that she barely slept or ate for a week. Now that Blaine was home, Zoe couldn't tear herself away. She stayed in his embrace, unable to let go. Blaine hadn't expected Zoe to cry so much. He wiped tears from her face, each one making an imprint on his heart. With Zoe still in his arms, he walked them over to the sofa, where he laid her down, trapping her between him and the sofa. Zoe was still crying, completely ignoring his actions. She covered her red and swollen eyes with her hands, embarrassed by her inability to stop, but unable to help herself. Blaine reached out and gently moved her hands away from her eyes. "Come, don't cry. Let me have a good look at you first." Zoe cried even harder when she heard this. She weakly slapped him on the chest as all of her pent-up emotions came spilling out. "You lied to me. You promised. You promised me that you would be safe, but then you disappeared. I didn't hear from you for a week. Do you know how worried I was? How scared I was?" Zoe sobbed uncontrollably. She had shed so many tears over this man, but these tears were different. Zoe knew she couldn't be with Blaine, but she couldn't handle the thought of Blaine not being a part of this world, even if he couldn't be a part of hers. Blaine smoothed Zoe's long hair off of her face as he took in the dark circles under her eyes and her pale complexion. Frowning, he told her, "And what about you? Zoe, you also promised that you would take good care of yourself. I was only gone 2 weeks, and you've lost so much weight. And you were already too thin. Is this how you take good care of yourself?" Zoe didn't argue with him because she knew what he said was true. She hadn't been taking care of herself. Zoe returned his gaze with watery eyes, telling him honestly, "I was so afraid I'd never see you again, so I haven't slept at all." "What do you mean you haven't slept at all?" Blaine's face instantly darkened, but his touch was gentle as he softly caressed Zoe's cheek, and his eyes filled with heartache. Zoe's eyes blurred. She hugged his sturdy waist, her small head snuggling into his embrace, and softly whispered, "I'm so sleepy. I really do want to sleep." Blaine was home. He had returned to Zoe's side. With her arms around him, knowing he was with her and safe, Zoe could finally sleep in peace. She faintly whispered, "I can finally sleep." As soon as Zoe finished her sentence, before Blaine could even reply, she fell into a deep sleep. Blaine raised his eyebrows in surprise, looking at her delicate, tear-streaked face, listening to her even breathing, a sound so light and pleasing. At that moment, Blaine knew this woman was his whole world. He knew that regardless of how much he dodged or evaded, he couldn't escape the hold Zoe had on his heart. It seemed that Zoe was destined to be the most important person in Blaine's life. Zoe slept soundly. When she next opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Blaine's handsome face. He slept peacefully beside her in his bedroom, the morning sun reflecting off his tan skin. Zoe couldn't help but reach out her hand to touch him, wanting to assure herself he was real and really home with her. However, before she could, Blaine suddenly woke up and caught her, shackling her small hand inside his big palm. He opened his eyes, which were filled with drowsy heat. He opened his mouth and slightly nibbled on Zoe's hand. With a flip of his body, Blaine pressed her under him. "You're touching me so early in the morning. Why? What do you want to do?" His voice was a little hoarse. Blaine watched her as Zoe stared up at him as if she was trying to determine whether the face in front of her was real. Suddenly, her eyes turned watery again. "Where have you been this past week?" Zoe asked in a pained whisper. Zoe had been so relieved and sleepy yesterday that she hadn't yet asked Blaine what exactly had happened to him. Now that Zoe had slept soundly, she needed to get answers to all of the questions that had been haunting her for a week. Blaine lowered his head and fixed his gaze on the woman beneath him. He placed both hands on the sides of Zoe's head, holding her. He stroked her forehead and cheeks with his thumbs, every touch warm and gentle. His movements were casual, but Blaine acted as if he was caressing the most precious treasure in his life. "Let's not talk about it," Blaine said seriously. "No." Zoe's eyes immediately turned red. She placed her hand over his where he held her head, telling him anxiously, "You're afraid I'll worry." "Be good," he coaxed her. Blaine didn't want to talk about the time he'd spent buried in the ruins of an apartment building. Those long, dark days were something he would remember for the rest of his life. He didn't want to talk about the frustration of facing death and not being able to do anything about it. He had realized that life was so fragile that it could be taken away at any moment, and that there was ultimately nothing anyone could do to escape one's fate. Blaine had nothing to eat and no water, and could only rely on his willpower to persevere. Until a miracle happened. Zoe returned his gaze. She could see the traces of pain in Blaine's eyes, the pain he was trying to mask for her benefit, and she let her questions go. "All right, I won't ask." Zoe nodded obediently and tightened her grip on his large hand. Blaine smiled. "I will tell you how I survived, though." "How?" Zoe asked in surprise. "I wasn't alone. I was trapped with an older man in his 60s who told me how much he missed his wife. She died of breast cancer 10 years ago, still relatively young, and he wished they'd had more time together. His wife had been his first love and soulmate, but they had broken up before finding their way back to one another. The man regretted the time he'd lost with her during those years apart now that she was gone. He asked me about my first love, and I told him our story. Before I finished, we were rescued. As they were carrying him out on a stretcher, the man was still asking me about my love story. He wanted to know how the story ended. As he said this, Blaine raised his eyebrows slightly. He gazed into Zoe's misty eyes and asked her, "What kind of ending do you think I should tell him?" Zoe's heart ached. Her tears were on the verge of spilling out, and she closed her burning eyes to avoid Blaine's intense gaze. She didn't dare look at him. She knew what he meant. Zoe's answer was the end of his story. Her evasion and silence gave Blaine the answer he didn't want to hear. With much difficulty, he sat up from Zoe's body. "You should sleep more. It's the weekend." Blaine's voice was much cooler compared to the warmth of his earlier tone. Zoe watched Blaine wince as he sat up and asked anxiously, "Are you hurt? Why didn't you say anything? Where were you injured? Let me see it." Zoe started to rise to check on his wounds, but he held her down. "Don't move." When Zoe heard this, she became even more nervous. "No, let me see it. Let me help you." Blaine took her hand, not allowing her to move. His sexy mouth hooked into an evil smile. "You really want to see it?" "Yes." "All right, then." Zoe blinked and stammered. What are you doing?" "Showing you my wound. You asked to see it, didn't you? It's still ready and willing, especially after a 2-week break." Zoe quickly looked away and held her hand out in front of her, motioning for him to stop. "No, don't take it out. Stop. I've changed my mind. I don't need to see it anymore." Blaine laughed out loud as he retracted his hand from the waist of his pants. Zoe couldn't help but feel relieved, but she also wanted to smack the smile off Blaine's laughing face for teasing her like that. "You go back to sleep. I'll shower first." Blaine stood, still chuckling, and headed for the bathroom after instructing her to rest. His pace was rather slow. He obviously feared that he would aggravate his wound. His real injury was on his back. Because he had been buried in rubble for 5 days, his wound had become infected and had festered. Blaine didn't want Zoe to see him like that, knowing she would worry too much. Zoe quickly threw off the blanket and got up. "Let me help you." Blaine accepted Zoe's assistance. He put one arm around her shoulders and even pressed all his weight onto her body. He lowered his head and looked at her, revealing a teasing smile. "Is this okay?" "Blaine, how much do you weigh exactly?" Zoe resentfully asked, panting a bit from exertion. "Not much, only twice as much as you." Blaine subtly moved his body a little away from Zoe to help her. Zoe, you have to put some weight on. You need to be stronger. I'm worried when we do it, I might break your little body in two. Blaine's blunt words flustered Zoe, and she angrily swatted his hand away in embarrassment. How can someone who looks so noble be so crude? Faced with Zoe's accusation, Blaine chuckled softly and didn't even deny it. Instead, he suddenly grabbed Zoe by the waist and lifted her onto the bathroom counter. Zoe was exasperated. What are you doing? First you're hobbling around like you're seriously injured, and now you're so energetic. Are you pretending? I'm just putting you to work. You wanted to help me. Blaine hugged Zoe's waist with one arm and supported himself on the sink with the other hand. He tilted his face towards Zoe and said coolly, "You're going to help me shave." Huh? Zoe looked at him in surprise, as she clearly felt her heart skipping a beat. I can't do that. I've never, shaved a man before. Zoe shyly refused. Blaine smiled at her statement. He was glad that Zoe had never done this for Matthew before. Even better, he said out loud. It's about time you learned. He took the shaving cream, handed it to Zoe, and placed his razor in her other hand. Since she was already in position, Zoe knew it would seem a bit unreasonable if she refused him again. She opened the can of shaving cream and tentatively sprayed some into her hand. She then patted it onto Blaine's stubble and lifted his razor. Am I doing it right? Yes. Blaine praised her. Now, just don't accidentally slit my throat with that razor and you'll get a gold star. Zoe sprayed shaving cream into her hand, raising Blaine's razor towards his face. He'd asked her to help him shave off the whiskers he'd grown during his time in Mexico City, but never having shaved a man before, Zoe was nervous. Am I doing this right? She asked him tentatively. Yes. Blaine praised. Now, just don't accidentally slit my throat with that razor, and you'll get a gold star. Immediately forgetting her nervousness in the wake of his sarcasm, Zoe took the glob of shaving cream in her hand and smacked it into the center of Blaine's face, bursting into laughter at his look of surprise. The brilliant smile on Zoe's face blinded Blaine's eyes. How could he be annoyed if just a little prank could make her smile so happily? Of course, not being annoyed and not getting payback were two different things. Blaine reached out his hand and scraped some of the foam off his face before smacking it onto Zoe's nose in retaliation. She sputtered, but Zoe refused to admit defeat, promptly spraying a thick layer of foam onto his chin. She sat on the sink and laughed. Now I know what you'll look like in your old age. As Zoe said this, Blaine snatched the shaving cream from Zoe's hands and sprayed it on her forehead so she looked like she had white hair. And now I know what you'll look like as a little old lady. Zoe reached for the shaving cream can to retaliate, but Blaine raised it high over her head so she couldn't reach it. No you don't. Blaine smiled as she struggled to reach it. Well, if you don't let me have it, I can't shave you. Zoe retorted, folding her arms defiantly. Promise you're done first, Blaine ordered, raising his eyebrows. Zoe wished she'd thought to spray those arrogant eyebrows as well. Okay, fine, I won't play with you anymore. Come closer, come over here so I can reach you. She smiled and waved the razor in her hand. Blaine obediently moved his chin towards Zoe. Now stay still. If I cut you, I won't be held responsible. Zoe used her left hand to hold his cheek, while her right hand held the razor as she slowly moved it under his chin. Her every movement was cautious, as if she feared that she would injure him. As Zoe worked, neither said anything for long moments, falling into a companionable silence. Once Zoe grew more comfortable with her task, she casually asked him, I heard you had to walk nearly 2 hours a day back and forth in Mexico City to call me? Zoe was trying to be nonchalant, but she was carefully observing Blaine's facial expressions. She was very curious about his answer. I heard that while I was gone, you were unable to do anything well, Blaine quickly responded. Who said that? That's nonsense. Zoe flatly rejected the idea. I have voicemail proof. Should I play it back for you? It's a little garbled, but I think you'll recognize the voice. The corner of Blaine's mouth curved into a smirk. Don't! Zoe curled her lips and grabbed Blaine's hand, which was reaching for his phone. Unexpectedly, she softened her tone, raised his hand, and gently rubbed her cheek against his palm. She said softly, "During that time, I was really afraid that you wouldn't come back." Zoe's eyes turned watery as she thought about how helpless and worried she had been while he was missing. She couldn't help but confess the words she had been holding in her heart. "I made a huge mistake at work that day. My boss was nice about it, just said to be more careful, but I felt terrible. However, I know why it happened. I couldn't think straight while you were missing. My mind was full of thoughts about where you were, how you were doing, and whether you were cold or hungry. At that moment, I was really afraid that I wouldn't ever see you again." As Zoe said this, she looked up at him tearfully. "Blaine, promise me in the future, don't do something so dangerous again, okay?" Blaine raised his eyebrows and looked at Zoe's teary face. There was a raging fire in his chest, burning with excitement. However, Blaine didn't allow himself to show it. He leaned closer to Zoe, looked her straight in the eye, and asked in a low voice, "What kind of status do you have to ask such a thing of me?" Although his tone was calm, the fervent anticipation in his eyes betrayed the deepest, truest thoughts in his heart. Zoe didn't know how to respond. She bit her lips, unconsciously trying to escape his question. She lowered her eyes and asked softly, "You don't want to agree?" With a single sentence, Blaine's resolute heart melted. This woman was destined to be his weakness. Blaine sighed silently and said, "I agree." No matter what they were to each other, he couldn't deny her. Zoe smiled through her tears. Just as she raised her head, a shadow fell over her. Suddenly, the front door buzzer sounded. Zoe was surprised. She snapped out of her daze and reached her hand up to stop Blaine. "Someone's here." He looked at her slightly flustered face and raised his eyebrow. "What are you scared of?" Zoe bit her lips nervously. Blaine tilted his head and looked at Zoe closely before reaching over to check the door monitor on the wall. His brow furrowed when he saw Sophia, who in a stroke of epic bad timing, was currently standing outside. Zoe saw the concern on Blaine's face, so she followed his line of sight and saw Sophia standing there. Zoe's face paled, and she quickly jumped down from the sink counter. Blaine shifted his gaze back to Zoe. He looked down at her with stormy eyes, as if he was waiting for Zoe's decision. Seeing Zoe biting her lips and not saying anything, Blaine decided for her. "I'll open the door." "No!" Zoe stretched out her hand to stop him. Blaine turned his head to look at her again. His eyes darkened. His lips were slightly cold as he knowingly asked, "Why?" Zoe took a deep breath, feigning indifference. "Didn't we agree not to let her know?" Blaine's eyes flickered with traces of shock and hostility. "Zoe, what if I say that I want to break off my engagement to her for you?" Zoe didn't expect him to say such a thing so suddenly. She was stunned, and her mind went blank for a few seconds before she snapped out of her daze and shook her head. "Blaine, don't be impulsive." "Impulsive?" Blaine smiled at Zoe as if he had heard the funniest joke he'd ever heard from her. "Zoe, do you think that what I feel for you is an impulse?" Zoe's entire head felt slightly dizzy. She didn't expect the whole thing to end like this. Zoe shook her head awkwardly as she steeled her heart and forced herself to say, "Blaine, I never wanted you to break off your engagement to her for me. And I never meant to be with you, just to make a deal with you. You've misunderstood." "Say what you just said again," Blaine yelled, his body exploding with hostility. Zoe could clearly see the fury in his eyes. He reached out his hands and restrained Zoe, pulling her into his arms. He glared at Zoe with hatred. "Zoe, repeat what you just said to me." Zoe's heart ached to look at the cold, sullen look on his face. With tears rolling down her face, she repeated herself. "I never wanted to be with you. I only approached you for money. I don't want Sophia to know about my relationship with you. I never meant to be with you, just to make a deal with you. Do you understand?" Zoe's words were like sharp blades, piercing straight into Blaine's heart. All of a sudden, he felt like a huge fool. For the sake of this woman, he would do anything. He thought her intentions were the same as his own, but what about the result? In the end, he was just a long-term meal ticket for her. Blaine gripped Zoe's wrist tightly. His fingers dug into Zoe's skin, causing her to frown in pain. Suddenly, without any warning, Zoe was brought along by Blaine and pushed against the cold tile wall of the bathroom. She felt a gust of cold air rush by her face before a heavy, muffled sound sounded in her ear. Blaine had punched the wall beside Zoe's face, releasing all the anger and hatred in his heart. "You're bleeding!" Zoe was so anxious that she reached out to grab his injured hand, but he abruptly stopped her. Blaine pressed Zoe heavily against the cold tile wall. A pair of cold eyes stared fixedly at Zoe, as if they wanted to tear her apart and devour her. Blaine roared at Zoe. Zoe was truly shocked. She had seen Blaine angry before, but she had never seen him this angry. He was completely enraged. His voice was as cold as ice, and the hostility surrounding his body was shocking. Zoe trembled as she bit her lips. She stared at him tearfully, looking into his furious eyes. She could see the fury in his eyes, but Zoe could also see the pain in them. Seeing his anger and pain, her heart hurt so much that it felt like it was being torn apart. He pressed Zoe against the wall, and she heard his cold, pain-filled words. "Zoe, you're despicable." She collapsed against Blaine's shoulder and burst into tears. She wished that she could tell him how much she loved him, how much she wanted to be with him. But with so many obstacles in her way, what could the path ahead bring them other than more pain and terror? When Zoe thought of how Catherine Dexter had threatened their son time and time again, she didn't dare to defy his mother. Because with every step she took, she was betting on Max's life. No mother would gamble their child's life in such a way. The sound of Zoe crying was like a sharp saw slicing into Blaine's heart. He leaned over Zoe, both of his arms braced on the wall beside her head. Blaine panted heavily, and the beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. He could feel that his back was drenched in blood. His movements just now aggravated his injury, causing his wound to open. But Blaine didn't feel any pain in his back. The pain in his heart, so great, it drowned out everything else. The only sounds in the bathroom were the sounds of Zoe's crying and Blaine's heavy breathing. Blaine cared deeply about this woman, but he still made her cry. Blaine's heartache made it hard for him to breathe. He hoarsely whispered to Zoe, "What am I going to do with you?" This was the second time the woman in his arms had broken his heart. The second time, he was so powerless that he didn't know what to do with her. "Leave." Blaine's voice was harsh and heavy. His throat felt as if a knife had cut it. He turned around and let go of Zoe without a shred of nostalgia. He leaned his body against the icy cold wall, closed his eyes, and breathed heavily, allowing the sweat to flow from his forehead. His handsome face was now devoid of color. When Blaine let go of her, Zoe grabbed her clothes off the floor and quickly dressed. When she stood up and turned around, Zoe saw Blaine's injured back, which was dyed red with blood. Zoe screamed in fear as tears immediately rolled down her face. "Blaine, you're back! You're back!" Zoe cried out, sobbing. "There's so much blood! How can there be so much blood? You need help!" He closed his eyes and didn't look at Zoe. A cold smile plastered on his lips. Looking at Blaine's pale face, Zoe was utterly flustered. I'll call 911. Hold on, don't move." She had never seen so much blood. The deep red that covered his entire back was horrifying. Zoe had never seen Blaine look this weak before. He was breathing heavily with great difficulty, and his face was so pale that it seemed devoid of life. Zoe was terrified. Zoe quickly ran to his bedroom to look for her cell phone. Her hands trembled as she rummaged through her bag. When she finally found her phone, she was about to dial the number when a big hand grabbed it and slammed it against the wall. With a bang, the phone shattered into a million pieces on the ground. Blaine let out a hoarse bellow. "I said leave!" "What are you doing?" Zoe shouted, now also furious. Tears flowed unrestrained from her eyes. If you're angry at me, then so be it, but don't risk yourself to spite me. You're bleeding. Blaine glared fiercely at Zoe. He was sweating profusely. His back hurt, but he didn't care. His brow furrowed as he took labored breaths. Zoe, you don't have the right to meddle in my business. Put away that heart of yours, which is so overflowing that it's disgusting. His face was filled with unconcealable disgust and deep loathing. Blaine felt like a fool. Zoe's big heart made him think she was in love with him again and again. She wasn't in love with him. Zoe just cared about people. Blaine wasn't special. She'd ruthlessly proven this to him again and again through her repeated rejections. He felt like an idiot. Blaine stormed over to the bedside table, picked up his wallet, pulled out a wad of bills, and threw them into Zoe's face. Here, payment for serving me. Take the money and leave. Immediately get out of my sight. The money danced in front of Zoe's eyes, causing her heart to hurt even more, and her tears continued unrestrained. She bit her lips and clenched her fists. She stood there, watching as the money rained down in front of her, feeling helpless. At that moment, Zoe wished she could tell him everything that had really happened 4 years ago. However, the moment she opened her mouth, she felt her vision darken. Then Zoe suddenly lost consciousness and fainted. Zoe! Zoe! When Zoe woke up, it was late at night. She was surprised to find herself lying in her own bed. Zoe, you're finally awake. Her mother sounded relieved. Gloria stood beside Zoe's bed, and when she saw Zoe wake up, she quickly served her a mug of hot soup. Quick, you need to eat and get some energy into you. Listen to your mother. Drink this chicken broth. Mom, how did I get home? Shouldn't she still be at Blaine's house? Zoe wondered to herself. How did she get home? Blaine had been covered in blood, and the last thing Zoe remembered was him throwing money at her. A female doctor named Ramona Anderson brought you home. Dr. Anderson said you fainted in the hospital, but it was nothing serious. She said you've likely just been working hard and not eating enough, and your blood sugar is too low. You just need to rest and eat, and soon you'll feel much better, Gloria told Zoe. Now, come on, listen to Mom. You need to drink this mug of soup. You haven't eaten anything all day. Mom, wait a minute. I want to call Ramona first, Zoe said, still confused. She hurriedly lifted the blanket and got up. Then she walked into the hall and picked up a landline. She quickly called Ramona. Ramona answered on the second ring. Ramona, it's me, Zoe. Zoe, are you all right? Ramona was concerned about her. Dr. Dexter had asked her to take Zoe home after she fainted. I'm fine. Zoe shook her head and asked, What about him? How are his injuries? Were you able to stop his bleeding? Zoe didn't dare to mention Blaine's name in front of her mother. But Ramona knew that Zoe was talking about Dr. Dexter. Ramona gave a faint sigh and said worriedly, He wouldn't let us touch him. He got so angry but wouldn't let anyone help him. If we don't deal with his back, sooner or later it will become inflamed and infected. But neither Jose nor I can persuade him. I was just thinking of calling to check on you and see if maybe you could try to talk to him if you were awake. Dr. Dexter always listens to you. When Zoe heard what Ramona said, it filled her with fear and trepidation. Her mind was in a daze. Blaine needed help, but wasn't letting anyone near him. After what happened earlier, would Zoe still have the ability to convince him of anything? After hanging up, she didn't even have to think about what to do. She knew she'd have to try to convince him. Zoe returned to her room, put on her clothes, and grabbed her purse. Zoe, what are you doing? You just woke up. It's late. Where are you going? You'll make yourself sicker. Gloria chased after her and shouted, Mom, I'm fine. I have something urgent to do. Don't worry. I'll be back soon, Zoe said as she grabbed the soup from her mother's hand. She quickly gulped it all down. Drink slowly. It's still hot. Slow down, slow down. Whatever is so urgent, it's not worth risking your health, Gloria shouted anxiously by her side. Zoe had already finished and handed the mug to Gloria. Mom, thank you. I'll be back soon. Zoe rushed out the door to go to Blaine's house. She felt a chill down her spine when she thought of the blood on his back. Seeing Ramona must have driven her home in her car, Zoe hopped in and quickly drove to Blaine's penthouse. It felt like Zoe got stuck behind every slow driver and that she hit every red light along the way. When she finally arrived at Blaine's building, Zoe sprinted up to the front entrance and began pressing his doorbell crazily. As Zoe feared, Blaine didn't answer. She pressed the buzzer over and over. She knew Blaine was angry with her, but she didn't care if he yelled at her. She needed to make sure he was okay and got help. Blaine stared at Zoe's anxious face on the video monitor. His chest felt like it was being squeezed by something, making it hard for him to breathe. The faint pain in his chest caused his pupils to constrict. If she didn't love him, why was she here? Why keep giving Blaine mixed signals only to tell him he had misunderstood her intentions towards him again and again? Blaine raised his hand, ready to turn off the monitor, before stopping abruptly. Zoe suddenly held up a small notebook and stuck it in front of the monitor. She held the book in front of her face, revealing only her eyes. Zoe looked at the monitor imploringly, trying not to arouse any sympathy. The notebook contained 2 big words: "I'm sorry." Blaine frowned, his dark eyes narrowed, and his face was still as cold as ice. Sorry? Huh. Blaine sneered. She didn't love him, so why feel sorry for him? He watched on the monitor as Zoe lowered her head again and scribbled something in her notebook. She quickly raised her hand and placed the notebook in front of the monitor. "Let me come in and look at your injuries." Before Blaine could react, Zoe lowered her head and started writing furiously in her notebook again. "I apologize for the nasty words I said to you. Please don't ignore your health because of me." Blaine pushed the talk button. His cold voice came through the microphone and seeped into Zoe's ears. "Zoe, you place too much stock in your importance. I was already stupid enough to walk 2 hours just for a phone call. I've learned my lesson." Blaine sneered at her. "Zoe, you don't hold that much weight in my heart." His words were like a slap in Zoe's face, and she gasped for breath. However, it made her guilty heart feel better. Didn't this mean he'd sought treatment? "Then, your injuries?" Zoe bit her lips and asked him. Blaine's tone didn't change at all. He had returned to the cold, emotionless Blaine and had once again built a barrier over his heart. "I'm a doctor, and I know better than anyone else the condition of my body. I don't need you to meddle in my business." After saying that, with a harsh click, he mercilessly hung up the phone. He turned off the monitor and even removed the battery from the doorbell. He completely sealed himself off from the world, not allowing anyone to disturb him, especially Zoe. After hearing his voice, Zoe felt relieved. She heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, her heart felt completely hollow. This empty feeling didn't feel good at all. After that night, the 2 of them didn't see each other for several days. Blaine had broken Zoe's phone and neither reached out to the other. They seemed to have lost their connection. Blaine was at the hospital, walking towards the emergency room with his hands in the pockets of his white coat when he saw Zoe running towards him. "Blaine! Blaine!" Blaine glanced at Zoe indifferently, but he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. "I'm swamped. I don't have time to talk right now." "No!" Zoe stretched out her hand to stop him. With a panicked expression, she pleaded, "Blaine, please, I'm begging you. You have to help my mom." When Blaine heard this, he suddenly stopped and turned to look at Zoe. His brow deeply creased and he asked, "What happened?" Zoe was relieved when she saw that he was willing to listen to her and hurriedly said, 2 days ago, my mom complained she had a migraine, but it didn't go away. I convinced her to go to our local urgent care last night when she complained of dizziness. They sent her for x-rays and they found..." Zoe paused, her voice cracking. "They found a tumor in her brain. It's malignant. Cancer. And the tumor is operable, but in a difficult position. Will you please examine her?" Zoe was completely agitated and practically in tears as she begged him. "Okay, calm down first," Blaine told her. Blaine took a notebook from his pocket and quickly wrote down a number. Then he tore it off and passed it to Zoe. "Give this number to the nurses station in the ER and tell them that I gave it to you. Bring your mother to the ER when the afternoon break comes. Blaine told her calmly. In addition, Blaine paused and looked at the worried Zoe before continuing. Don't worry, this is what I do. If it's operable, it doesn't matter where the tumor is. I can help her. Zoe was touched by Blaine's assurance that he could help her mother. She knew that he was comforting her, although his attitude was not obvious. Zoe clutched the number he had given her for an appointment and said softly, "Thank you, Blaine." Blaine nodded lightly and didn't say anything else. He turned around and prepared to leave. However, he stopped when he felt her small hand touch his arm tentatively. Blaine frowned slightly. He glanced at Zoe out of the corner of her eye, but he didn't turn his head back, nor did he speak. "Your injury on your back, how is it?" Zoe asked, unable to hold her concern in any longer. Blaine shook Zoe's hand off. "Ms. Fuller, whether my injury is better or worse has nothing to do with you." After he finished speaking, Blaine started walking away from her. As Blaine walked, he dialed the hospital's director's number. "Tell the director I need to speak to him about his proposal to charge visitors for coffee. It hardly serves our reputation as a place of healing if we can't even provide our patients' families with this basic courtesy. What next? Are we going to make them pay the cable television charges in the waiting room?" "Yes, good idea. Go get him. I'll hold." She saw Blaine shake his head in aggravation. Zoe watched Blaine's white back disappear around the corner. Listening to him speak righteously to the hospital director, Zoe's heavy heart seemed to feel lighter suddenly. Just seeing Blaine made her feel slightly better. He had given her the hope she so desperately needed right now. At noon, Zoe brought her mother to the hospital for her appointment with Blaine. Gloria heard Blaine would be the one treating her tumor, and an argument ensued. Her mother was extremely unhappy, but Zoe didn't care. She told her mother that she needed the best surgeon, and since Blaine was the best, he was the doctor Zoe would be taking her to see. Gloria eventually gave in. However, when Blaine walked into the exam room, Gloria's expression was still far from friendly. "Hello, Mrs. Fuller." Blaine politely greeted her as he sat down. "Mom," Zoe quietly prompted her mother under her breath to be polite. Gloria shot her daughter a look out of the corner of her eye before reluctantly offering a curt, "Hello. May I take a look at the CT of Mrs. Fuller's brain?" Blaine's question was directed to Zoe as he got straight to the point. Zoe quickly passed the CT image to him. Blaine took the image out and placed it on the light board. Zoe silently watched as he carefully studied it for a while. The expression on his handsome face remained carefully neutral throughout his inspection. Finally, Blaine turned his chair around and faced Zoe and Gloria. He placed his hands on the table and said seriously, "Mrs. Fuller, I'm going to be honest with you. Your tumor is indeed located in a difficult position. An operation of this sort would be quite tricky." Hearing this, Zoe's face immediately paled. Gloria, beside her daughter, took the news much more calmly. She only said, "It's all right, Dr. Dexter, do your best. There's really no other way. If the operation works or not, I have no real choice. I've had a lot of good years, so if this is my time, I'll understand." "Mom, how can you say such a thing? I won't allow you to speak such depressing words." Zoe turned to Blaine. "Dr. Dexter, can this tumor be removed?" Blaine didn't directly answer Zoe's question. He just pointed at Gloria's CT scan and explained to both women in a serious tone. "This brain tumor is located close to the great arteries and compressing the optic nerve at the same time. I'll be honest, most surgeons wouldn't even attempt such an operation." "Dr. Dexter, just say it. What are my chances?" Gloria asked. "The success rate for this type of operation is less than 20%. Not only could the operation fail to remove all the tumor, but even if it is successful, the tumor's proximity to the optic nerve could result in other permanent damage, such as blindness. This operation has a significant risk, and while I am willing to attempt it, before I do so, I must be sure that both of you, as the patient and your family, understand the possible outcomes. Also, Mrs. Fuller, I recommend that if you are going to proceed with the operation, you should be immediately admitted to the hospital." Upon hearing what Blaine said, Gloria immediately shook her head, rejecting him. No, I'm living at home. Why would I need to stay in the hospital?" "Dr. Dexter, can I trouble you to arrange for my mom's hospitalization?" Zoe ignored her mother and decided for her. Zoe, no, I won't allow it. Gloria immediately argued. Mom, this is not optional. Please don't make me worry about this. Zoe knew what her mother wasn't saying out loud. Her mom was worried that the cost would be too high when Zoe was already stretched to her limit taking care of Max. Looking into her daughter's anxious eyes, Gloria didn't continue to be stubborn and agreed. Blaine accompanied Zoe to complete her mother's admission paperwork. Blaine handed his black card to the hospital cashier without Zoe saying anything. He knew Zoe couldn't afford it unless she used his card. As Blaine signed the receipt, Zoe stood next to him and felt embarrassed. Blaine, thank you, she said quietly. Don't worry, I'll pay you back. Zoe would be getting paid at the end of the week and figured she could give him money towards this then. But after signing, Blaine put down the pen in his hand and passed the slip through the window. He then looked at Zoe indifferently and ridiculed. Pay me? With what? Zoe bit her lips, immediately feeling her embarrassment grow. Blaine handed her mother's admission registration forms to Zoe and said indifferently, Keep your phone open. I will naturally give you the chance to pay me back.
Now, with Zoe's mother facing a life-threatening illness, Blaine steps in to offer his expertise as a surgeon. But his help comes at a price. She wonders if their love can ever truly heal, or if the wounds from their past will forever keep them apart. Will Zoe be able to navigate this complex situation without compromising herself? Can she find a way to repay Blaine's kindness without succumbing to his demands? And will their shared experience with her mother's illness finally bring them closer, or will it push them further apart? Hi, Zoe here. If you are wondering what happens next, then download the Pocket FM app and listen to the exciting episodes of Rekindled Heartache now.